Hey there, tonight we're uncovering the global history of fireworks and the new year, where what you're about to discover sparks from ancient Chinese fortresses to modern-day celebrations might just surprise you. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now settle in, maybe turn on some white noise or grab your favorite blanket, and let's drift into tonight's story together. In ancient China, where the air was thick with both mysticism and incense, there was this whole obsession with immortality that would make modern billionaires' youth serums look like toddlers' finger paints. Taoist monks, with more curiosity than caution, dabbled in the alchemy of life extension. And let's just say their experiments didn't exactly go as planned. Somewhere in the 9th century, they stumbled upon a concoction that was less about eternal life and more about eternal explosions. This little mix-up led to the birth of gunpowder, the granddaddy of all things that go boom. Now, you might be wondering, how does one accidentally invent gunpowder? Well, when you're mixing sulfur, charcoal, and potassium nitrate, ingredients that scream, "Do not try this at home," miracles or mayhem can happen. And mayhem it was. The monks' quest for immortality sparked the creation of the very first firecrackers, which were essentially the ancient equivalent of, "Hey, watch this" moments. Talk about a dangerous fountain of youth attempt. The irony of it all is that while the monks were trying to live forever, they ended up creating something that made life a lot more exciting, albeit with a higher chance of sudden deafness. But before you judge too harshly, remember that these were the same folks who believed that the cosmos could be influenced by the right mix of elements. They weren't just playing with fire, they were playing with the universe. Fast forward a couple of centuries, and these explosive devices were making quite the racket in celebrations, particularly to welcome the new year. Firecrackers were believed to scare off evil spirits, a noble cause if there ever was one. After all, nobody wants to start their new year with bad vibes. The louder the bang, the better the chances of keeping malevolent forces at bay. In the spirit of full disclosure, the evil spirits probably just had sensitive hearing. Let's not gloss over the fact that gunpowder's journey from a monk's lab to festival fireworks wasn't a straight line. It meandered through military applications, because of course it did. The same explosive power that could light up the night sky had a slightly darker side on the battlefield. But that's a tale for another time. Back to the festivities. The Chinese New Year, with its origins dating back over 3,000 years, is the grand stage where fireworks have shone the brightest. The festival is a cacophony of sound and color, where firecrackers play a starring role. But don't let the dazzling display fool you. The tradition is steeped in a mix of practicality and superstition, a potent blend that's as old as civilization itself. Picture this: the streets filled with crimson, the air crackling with the scent of gunpowder, and the sky painted with bursts of light. This is more than just a party trick, it's a cultural phenomenon. The firecracker's role is as much about storytelling as it is about spectacle. It's a narrative of triumph over adversity, of light over darkness, and of course, of monks over their own miscalculations. The allure of fireworks, however, isn't just their ability to light up the night. It's their symbolism. They're a testament to humanity's eternal quest for wonder and the lengths we'll go to achieve it, sometimes dangerously so. Fireworks represent hope and renewal, perfect for ushering in a new year. They're a reminder that while we might not have cracked the code for living forever, we sure know how to make a moment memorable. So, as the clock strikes midnight, and the first firework explodes into the sky, remember the unlikely journey that brought it to life. From a monk's quest for immortality to a global symbol of celebration, fireworks have a history as colorful as their displays. And that, dear listener, is something worth celebrating. Speaking of making moments memorable, let's pivot to a time when fireworks took a detour from their Chinese roots and embarked on a grand European tour. Now, you might think that the Silk Road was all about silk, spices, and a touch of exotic mystique, but it had a few explosive surprises up its sleeve too. Picture the 13th century. Marco Polo is gallivanting across Asia, and the Mongols are doing their best Genghis Khan impersonation, expanding their empire faster than you can say world domination. It was during this whirlwind of cultural exchanges and invasions that gunpowder and its party-loving cousin, fireworks, made a cameo appearance on the European stage. But let's not give all the credit to the Silk Road. The Mongol Empire, which stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the heart of Europe, was like the Amazon prime of the medieval world, quick, expansive, and slightly terrifying. The Mongols didn't just bring fear and ferocity, they were also connoisseurs of innovation. Their military campaigns weren't just about conquering lands, but also about collecting and disseminating knowledge. So, when they stumbled across gunpowder, you better believe it made its way into their arsenal. And from there, it was only a matter of time before enterprising Europeans got their hands on this magical dust. Enter the medieval royals. These folks had a penchant for displays of wealth and power that would make modern-day billionaires look like frugal minimalists. They were always on the lookout for the next big thing to dazzle their subjects and intimidate their rivals. So when gunpowder arrived, they saw not just a weapon, but an opportunity to light up their courts in style. Fireworks became the medieval equivalent of Instagram influencers' flashy posts, only with a lot more boom and a tad less humility. Let's talk numbers. By the late 13th and early 14th centuries, Italy had become a hub for pyrotechnics. The Italians, ever the artists, saw fireworks as an extension of their love for spectacle. The first recorded instance of fireworks being used in Europe was in 1379 at the wedding of England's King Henry VII and Elizabeth of York. It was a sight to behold, and probably a bit of a fire hazard, given the medieval penchant for flammable materials. But hey, what's a little risk when you're trying to impress the in-laws? While the Italians were busy perfecting the art of the skyward whoosh, other European powers were quick to catch on. France, Germany, and England started incorporating fireworks into their festivities by the 14th and 15th centuries. It was like a medieval arms race, only instead of nuclear warheads, it was about who could create the most dazzling display of pyrotechnic prowess. The phrase, "mine's bigger than yours," took on a whole new meaning in the context of fireworks. Let's debunk a myth while we're at it. Many people believe that European fireworks displays were purely about celebration. In reality, they were as much about politics as they were about parties. These displays were intricately tied to the power dynamics of the time. A grand fireworks show wasn't just a celebration. It was a statement. It said, "Look at me. I've got the resources to burn money on explosions in the sky." It was a not-so-subtle way of flexing political muscles and asserting dominance. Of course, no good story is complete without a bit of irony. While fireworks were a symbol of power, they were also a stark reminder of the volatile nature of that power. The same gunpowder that fueled these spectacular shows was also used in warfare, a duality that wasn't lost on the ruling classes. It was a delicate dance between awe-inspiring beauty and the destructive potential lurking beneath the surface. Kind of like showing off a pet tiger, majestic, but capable of turning on you at any moment. And let's not forget the economic implications. These displays weren't cheap. The cost of producing fireworks was astronomical, especially given the labor-intensive processes involved. From sourcing the raw materials to the meticulous crafting of each explosive device, creating a fireworks display was an investment, not just in money, but in time and expertise. It was a luxury that only the wealthiest could afford, further cementing the divide between the haves and the have-nots. As fireworks continued to spread across Europe, they evolved in complexity and scale. By the 16th and 17th centuries, pyrotechnics had become an art form in their own right. Fire masters, yes, that was a job title, were employed to create elaborate displays that could last for hours. These weren't just random explosions, they were carefully orchestrated performances, complete with choreography and themes. It was Cirque du Soleil meets Michael Bay, with a bit more medieval flair and a lot less CGI. The popularity of fireworks only grew with time, and soon no royal event was complete without them. Coronations, weddings, treaties, any occasion that called for celebration was an excuse to light up the sky. It was a tradition that transcended borders, with each country adding its own unique twist to the art of pyrotechnics. The English, for instance, were particularly fond of using fireworks in conjunction with music, creating an early form of what we might now call a multimedia experience. But perhaps the most telling aspect of this pyrotechnic craze was its enduring appeal. Despite the practical risks and astronomical costs, fireworks captivated the human imagination in a way few other inventions have. They were a testament to our intrinsic desire to create beauty, to awe and inspire, even if it meant playing with fire, quite literally. It's a wonder that, in an age where most people's lives were consumed with the struggle for survival, there was still room for such frivolity. But that's the paradox of being human, isn't it? We're capable of both the mundane and the magnificent, often in the same breath. As we move forward in our tale, remember that the story of fireworks is as much about the people who wielded them as it is about the explosions themselves. Each burst of color in the night sky tells a story of ambition, creativity, and the unyielding desire to leave a mark on the world. Whether through the grand displays of European royalty or the humble celebrations of the common folk, fireworks have etched themselves into the fabric of global culture. And this, dear listener, is a legacy that continues to burn brightly, even as the centuries roll on. As our tale of pyrotechnics continues to blaze across history, we find ourselves on the brink of revolution, not just in the skies, but on the ground in the American colonies. It's the late 18th century, and the air is thick with the scent of rebellion and, fittingly, gunpowder. The American Revolutionary War wasn't just a showdown of muskets and bayonets. It was a stage where fireworks made their explosive debut as symbols of liberty, lighting up the night in more ways than one. Enter John Adams, founding father and part-time prophet. Before the ink was even dry on the Declaration of Independence, Adams had a vision. No, not of the United States' eventual obsession with baseball, apple pie, and reality TV, but of grand celebrations with fireworks as the star attraction. On July 3, 1776, he wrote to his wife, Abigail, predicting that Independence Day would be commemorated with pomp and parade, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other. Talk about foresight. At the time, fireworks were a luxury, often reserved for royalty or the very wealthy. But in a budding nation built on the ideals of freedom and equality, fireworks became democratized, a fitting metaphor for the revolution itself. They were both a celebration and a statement, a dazzling reminder of the new nation's aspirations. So, while redcoats and revolutionaries clashed by day, the night skies told a different story, a story of hope and defiance. Now, let's talk practicality. Fireworks weren't exactly mass-produced in colonial America, and the economic context was, shall we say, challenging. War isn't cheap, and neither are fireworks. The colonies were strapped for cash, their coffers as empty as a politician's promise. Yet somehow they scraped together the resources to light up the skies. This wasn't just about showing off. It was about sending a message to both allies and adversaries. America was here to stay, and it intended to do so with a bang. But fireworks during the Revolutionary War were more than just a symbol of independence. They were a tool of morale boosting. Imagine the psychological impact on soldiers weary from battle when the night sky erupted in fiery celebration. It was a reminder of what they were fighting for, a tangible representation of their dreams for freedom. Sure, they might have preferred a hot meal or a pair of decent boots, but fireworks were a close second. Yet, not everyone was thrilled with these explosive displays. Some critics argued that fireworks were an unnecessary extravagance, a frivolity that distracted from the brutal realities of war. And they weren't entirely wrong. After all, it's hard to justify spending precious resources on pyrotechnics when there are troops to feed and weapons to supply. But that's the paradox of revolution, balancing the pragmatism of war with the idealism of what comes after. As America fought for its independence, fireworks became an integral part of its national identity. When the Treaty of Paris was signed in 1783, officially ending the war, fireworks lit up the sky in celebration. It was a fitting conclusion to a conflict that had reshaped the world. The fireworks weren't just a victory lap, they were a promise of the bright future that lay ahead. But let's not romanticize too much. Reality was that fireworks were still dangerous, unpredictable, and prone to mishaps. There were no safety regulations, no designated viewing areas. People gathered wherever they could, probably a bit too close for comfort, considering the flammability of 18th century attire. It was a miracle more people didn't end up as collateral damage in these fiery spectacles. Despite the risks, the allure of fireworks continued to grow. They became a symbol of American resilience, a testament to the nation's ability to rise from the ashes, literally and figuratively. As the 19th century dawned, fireworks were firmly entrenched in American culture. They were used to celebrate everything from political victories to public holidays, each display more elaborate than the last. Now, let's debunk a myth while we're at it. Many believe that the widespread use of fireworks in America was purely about celebration. In reality, they were also a crafty bit of political theater. These displays were carefully orchestrated to reinforce national unity, to remind citizens of their shared identity and purpose. It was a not-so-subtle way of keeping the revolutionary spirit alive, even as the country faced new challenges. And speaking of challenges, let's not forget the economic implications. As the demand for fireworks grew, so did the industry. By the mid-19th century, the United States was producing its own fireworks, reducing reliance on European imports. This wasn't just about patriotism, it was about practicality. Domestic production meant lower costs, more control, and importantly, more jobs. It was a win-win situation, unless you were a European pyrotechnics supplier. So, as we look back on the role of fireworks in the American Revolutionary War, it's clear they were more than just an explosive novelty. They were a symbol of hope and perseverance, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's always a spark worth igniting. Fireworks have continued to evolve, both technologically and culturally, but their core essence remains unchanged. They are a celebration of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, all wrapped up in a glorious burst of color and light. As we leave behind the revolution and look ahead to the future, remember that the story of fireworks is far from over. They have become a global phenomenon, transcending borders and cultures, uniting people in a shared sense of wonder. And as the centuries roll on, one thing remains certain. Wherever there are celebrations, there will be fireworks. They are a timeless testament to humanity's enduring desire to illuminate the night, to leave our mark on the world, and to remind ourselves that, no matter how dark the times may seem, there is always light on the horizon. As we leave behind the revolution and look ahead to the future, fireworks aren't just lighting up the night skies. They're about to get an industrial strength upgrade. Enter the 19th century, a time when steam engines were chugging, factories were belching smoke, and fireworks were about to be mass-produced faster than you can say, assembly line. Industrialization transformed fireworks from luxury goods into accessible symbols of celebration. Let's dive into some numbers. By the late 1800, pyrotechnic factories in the United States could churn out thousands of fireworks daily. Previously, these explosive delights were handcrafted with painstaking precision, each one a mini-masterpiece. With machines taking the reins, production exploded, pun very much intended. But here's the kicker. Safety standards were as non-existent as Bigfoot's tax returns. If you think teenagers today are reckless, try working in a 19th century fireworks factory. With no regulations in place, these places were literal powder kegs, prone to catastrophic mishaps. It's a wonder anyone survived to see the fruits of their labor light up the night. The economic context is crucial here. Fireworks, once the playthings of kings and queens, became accessible to the masses, thanks to industrialization. This democratization of pyrotechnics mirrored the broader social changes of the time, as ordinary people began to enjoy the fruits of technological progress. By the 1870, a box of firecrackers could be yours for under $1, a bargain that put a bang in everyone's budget. Now, let's talk about the folks behind the fireworks. Italians, with their flair for the dramatic, were at the forefront of this pyrotechnic revolution. Italian immigrants brought their skills to America, opening workshops and transforming the U.S. into a pyrotechnics powerhouse. Companies like Zambelli and Grucci, founded in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, became synonymous with fireworks in the States. Forget Hollywood. These were the real stars lighting up the show. The appeal of fireworks remained as fiery as ever. They became staples at public events, from 4th of July celebrations to county fairs. By 1900, fireworks were woven into the fabric of American culture, a tradition that exploded in popularity as the new century dawned. But behind the dazzling displays lay a darker reality, one that involved frequent accidents and a lack of oversight. Let's debunk a myth. Many believe that fireworks were universally embraced, but not everyone was thrilled with these noisy invaders. Some communities, rattled by the endless booms, campaigned for quieter celebrations. In 1906, Chicago enacted one of the first laws banning fireworks within city limits. It was a classic case of not in my backyard, as city dwellers sought to balance celebration with sanity. Despite the occasional backlash, the fireworks industry continued to grow. By the 1920s, it was a multi-million-dollar business, with companies like the American Fireworks Company leading the charge. Fireworks had become big business, and with that came big risks. Factories operated with a laissez-faire attitude towards safety, resulting in frequent explosions that would make a Michael Bay film look like a gentle breeze. The absence of safety regulations was staggering. Workers, often children, toiled in hazardous conditions, their lives a constant gamble against the odds. The 1922 explosion at a fireworks factory in New Jersey, which killed 10 people, was a grim reminder of the industry's darker side. Yet, despite the risks, the demand for fireworks remained insatiable. World War II brought a temporary setback to the fireworks industry. With resources diverted to the war effort, production slowed. However, the post-war boom reignited the industry with a vengeance. By the 1950, fireworks were back in full force, symbolizing peace and prosperity in a world eager to celebrate new beginnings. In this era of growth, regulations finally began to catch up. The National Fireworks Association was founded in 1948, advocating for safer practices. By the 1960s, federal laws mandated warning labels and safety instructions on fireworks, a small step towards protecting consumers from their own enthusiasm. But let's not fool ourselves. Fireworks were still an unpredictable beast. Homemade displays, often assembled by well-meaning but clueless enthusiasts, continued to result in injuries and property damage. The allure of DIY pyrotechnics was as irresistible as ever, proving that while technology might evolve, human nature remains as incorrigible as a cat in a birdcage. Economically, the industry was thriving. By 1976, the U.S. was importing over 8 million pounds of fireworks annually, mostly from China, where production costs were lower. This influx of cheaper fireworks democratized the spectacle even further, making it accessible to anyone with a few bucks and a penchant for pyromania. As the 20th century progressed, fireworks became an integral part of global celebrations. From Sydney to San Francisco, cities worldwide embraced pyrotechnics as a universal language of joy. The advent of computer technology in the 1980s brought even more sophistication to displays, allowing for choreographed performances that synchronized with music. Think Beethoven with a side of kaboom. A myth worth debunking is the notion that all fireworks are created equal. In reality, the complexity of pyrotechnics varies widely, from simple firecrackers to elaborate shells that paint the sky in intricate patterns. The science behind these displays is as precise as it is explosive, a testament to human ingenuity and our unending quest for wonder. So, as we look back on the evolution of fireworks in the 19th and 20th centuries, it's clear that their journey is a reflection of technological progress, economic change, and cultural adaptation. They've gone from the exclusive realm of kings to the backyard barbecues of ordinary folks, proof that sometimes the best things in life are the ones that go boom. Remember, dear listener, that while the story of fireworks is filled with colorful displays and explosive narratives, it also carries a cautionary tale about the balance between spectacle and safety. As we prepare to dive into the final chapter of our pyrotechnic saga, keep in mind that the legacy of fireworks is as much about the sparks they ignite in our hearts as the ones they send into the sky. Stay tuned for more fiery tales to come. As we prepare to dive into the final chapter of our pyrotechnic saga, let's focus on how New Year's Eve has become the global stage for fireworks. No longer just a backyard spectacle or a local tradition, these displays have evolved into grandiose events that unite people across continents, starting the year with the kind of bang that would make ancient Taoist monks proud. Take Sydney, Australia, for instance. Every December 31st, over 1 million spectators gather around the iconic harbour bridge, eagerly awaiting the sky to ignite with a dazzling display. The Australians have turned New Year's Eve fireworks into an art form, with the 2020 show costing a cool 6 million Australian dollars. That's a hefty price tag for a 12-minute spectacle, but who's counting when you've got half the planet watching on live TV? It's a blend of economics and entertainment, where the budget for these displays runs parallel to the GDP of a small nation. Meanwhile, on the other side of the globe, New York's Times Square has its own version of this pyrotechnic pageantry. While the ball drop may get all the glory, the fireworks are the unsung heroes of the night. Over 1 billion people tune in worldwide, a testament to humanity's fascination with fiery displays. It's a stage where the stars aren't just in the sky, they're exploding in a riot of color, seen from every corner of the earth. But let's not get too swept away by the romance of it all. Behind these stunning visuals lies a harsh reality, the environmental impact. Every year, the world's obsession with fireworks releases thousands of tons of metal pollutants into the atmosphere. In 2018 alone, an estimated 60,000 tons of carbon dioxide were released due to fireworks globally. Those are numbers that should make anyone pause, even if only for a moment before the next ooh and ah. So, why do we continue to indulge in this luminous extravagance? Because, dear listener, fireworks tap into something fundamental about the human condition, our eternal quest for wonder. They're the perfect marriage of art and science, a testament to our ability to create fleeting beauty in a world that often feels all too permanent. They offer a sense of unity that transcends language and culture, a shared experience that reminds us we're all part of something bigger. Yet, it's worth questioning if the magic justifies the cost. The environmental footprint of these events is significant, prompting a growing number of cities to explore alternative celebrations. Tucson, Arizona, for example, has experimented with drone light shows and laser displays as greener options. These innovations might lack the visceral thrill of a firework explosion, but they offer a glimpse into a future where technology and tradition might find a sustainable balance. Here's where we debunk a classic myth, the idea that fireworks are universally beloved. In reality, they're a source of contention. For every person enthralled by the spectacle, there's another who dreads the noise, the pollution, or the impact on wildlife. It's a reminder that beauty is subjective, and even the most dazzling display has its detractors. The economic context of these modern spectacles is also fascinating. Cities invest millions not just for the sake of tradition, but for tourism and global publicity. A successful fireworks show can boost local economies, drawing visitors and media attention like a moth to a flame. It's a high-stakes game of pyrotechnic poker, where the payoff is measured in both dollars and delight. As we conclude this fiery journey through history, it's clear that fireworks are more than just explosions in the sky. They're a narrative of human ambition, creativity, and the paradoxical desire to capture the ephemeral. From ancient Chinese alchemists to modern-day city planners, the story of fireworks is a testament to our unyielding quest to light up the night. So, the next time you find yourself craning your neck to watch a firework burst into a cascade of colors, remember the centuries of history that led to that moment. Consider the monks who accidentally invented gunpowder, the medieval kings who turned it into a spectacle, and the modern cities that continue to push the boundaries of what's possible. Fireworks are a bridge between the past and the future, a symbol of the enduring human spirit and our relentless pursuit of awe. In the end, perhaps the greatest legacy of fireworks is their ability to remind us of our shared humanity. In a world filled with division and discord, they offer a moment of unity, a collective breath held in anticipation of the next great burst of light. They're a reminder that while we may not know what the future holds, we can always face it together, with wonder and a little bit of sparkle. Wake up in a tent that smells like a mix of sweat, damp wool, and leftover dreams of glory. The sound of metal clanging outside tells you it's time to rise and shine, if shine can ever really apply to a knight in the Crusades. Here you are, a so-called noble warrior, but let's burst that bubble right away. Chances are you didn't come from a line of illustrious lords. Your grandpa was probably not dining with kings, more like wrangling pigs, or something equally glamorous. Now, let's talk real estate medieval style. If you think you've got a cushy start in life because you're wearing a knight's tabard, think again. In the 12th century, social mobility is about as fast as a snail on tranquilizers. Sure, you might have a title, but it's not an express pass to riches. You've scraped and saved, possibly even begged, borrowed, or bartered your way into this gig. Becoming a knight isn't cheap. It's like buying a sports car today, except instead of impressing your neighbors, you're trying not to die in a foreign desert. First, there's the sword. This isn't some mass-produced item you pick up at the medieval equivalent of a shopping mall. A good sword costs around half of what a laborer would earn in a year. Let's put that in perspective. If you're a knight on a budget, your sword's probably worth more than your life insurance policy, assuming that existed. We're not even talking about those fancy, jewel-encrusted swords you see in the movies. No, your sword is a workhorse, not a showpiece. Armor, of course, is another story. A full suit of armor can set you back about 40 pounds of silver, which is a king's ransom when you're just trying to avoid getting skewered. But hey, who needs financial stability when you can have the joy of lugging around 100 pounds of metal in the searing heat, right? Then there's your trusty steed. A knight without a horse is like a rock star without a guitar, just a sad guy with a weird outfit. A good warhorse could cost you more than a small village's annual income. Yes, you heard that right. Imagine if owning a car today meant coughing up the GDP of a minor European nation. That's your life now. And this horse isn't just for show, it's your battle buddy and your getaway car. No pressure, just your life hanging in the balance. Chivalry, that oh-so-romantic notion of knights being paragons of virtue. Let's take a reality check. In truth, you're more mercenary than Messiah. The code of chivalry is a bit like the pirate code in Pirates of the Caribbean, more like guidelines, really. Sure, you're supposed to be brave, honorable, and pious, but when push comes to shove, survival often trumps scruples. After all, it's hard to keep your moral compass straight when you're surrounded by chaos and carnage. Speaking of survival, the Crusades are a logistical nightmare. Picture moving an army across continents without GPS or even reliable maps. Instead, you're relying on scribbles that make a toddler's crayon drawing look like a masterpiece. Supplies are scarce, and clean water's about as common as a unicorn. Dysentery could take you out before you even see a Saracen. It's less knight in shining armor, and more knight hoping not to die of dehydration. But here's the kicker. Despite the dirt, the danger, and the constant threat of death, there's something about this life that keeps you going. Maybe it's the camaraderie with your fellow knights, or the thrill of battle, or perhaps the distant hope of glory. Whatever it is, you're here, and you're a part of history, even if nobody remembers your name. So, as you strap on your armor and mount your horse, remember that the romanticized tales of knights are just that, tales. The reality is much grittier, with fewer dragons and more dysentery. But hey, whoever said history was clean? So, as you and your metal cocoon creak into motion, let's dive into what medieval travel really means. Forget the Instagram-worthy images of knights galloping gloriously into sunsets. This is more like a grueling episode of Medieval Survivor, Road Edition. You're facing hundreds, if not thousands, of miles of unpaved paths that would make a modern pothole look like a minor inconvenience. Picture this, your journey to the Holy Land, the ultimate road trip without the luxury of a Spotify playlist. You're looking at about 3,000 miles from Paris to Jerusalem. Think about it. That's like hoofing it from New York to Los Angeles, and just for fun, throwing in a detour through the Rockies. And no, there aren't any roadside diners serving medieval milkshakes. Time is another beast entirely. Depending on your starting point, it could take months, even up to a year to reach your destination. We're not talking about leisurely strolls here, but a relentless march where the pace is dictated by your horse's stamina and your ability to avoid the plague bandits and the occasional political skirmish. Oh, the romance of it all. Speaking of dangers, the road is littered with them. Bandits are the medieval version of highway robbers, eager to relieve you of your precious silver, or worse, your life. Then there's the terrain itself, rugged mountains, treacherous rivers, and vast deserts that seem to stretch on forever, daring you to cross with limited water supplies and questionable navigation skills. You know, just your average Tuesday. But let's not forget the human element. The Crusades aren't just a clash of swords, they're a tangled web of alliances and rivalries. On your journey, you might find yourself breaking bread with a fellow knight one day and crossing swords the next. Political alliances shift faster than a knight can draw his sword, and you need to stay sharp, both literally and figuratively. The political chess game of the Crusades is a spectacle of its own. At the heart of it are the big players, the Pope, European monarchs, and various noble houses, each with their own agendas. The Pope's call to arms in 1095 was a masterstroke of religious marketing, cloaked in the promise of spiritual salvation and earthly plunder. But underneath, it's a scramble for power, land, and influence. The Byzantine Empire wants to fend off the Seljuk Turks, while the European kings see a chance to expand their territories under the guise of holy war. It's like a medieval Game of Thrones, but with less dragons and more dysentery. Even on the ground, knights like you are playing a high-stakes game. Loyalties are fluid, and today's ally could be tomorrow's foe. You're constantly assessing who can be trusted and who might betray you the moment it suits their purposes. It's a strategic dance where one wrong move could see you end up on the business end of a sword. And let's not forget the economics of this grand adventure. Financing your crusade is akin to burning a hole through your chainmail pocket. You've already sunk a small fortune into your armor, weaponry, and horse. Now, you need to consider the cost of provisions for the journey. A knight's diet is hardly gourmet, hardtack, salted meat, and whatever else you can scrounge up along the way. Oh, and don't forget the wine, because clean water is about as common as a sober Viking. The reality of this journey is a far cry from the romanticized tales of chivalry and conquest. Yet, there's a certain allure in the sheer madness of it all, the camaraderie forged in hardship, the thrill of the unknown, and the distant promise of glory that keeps you pressing onward. It's a test of endurance, wits, and sheer stubbornness. As you ride onward, take a moment to appreciate the absurdity of it all. Here you are, a knight in shining armor, on a quest that might be more about survival than salvation, more about the journey than the destination. It's a messy, chaotic, and utterly human endeavor, and you're right in the thick of it, making history one dusty mile at a time. As you trudge into the Crusader camp, your dreams of knightly splendor are quickly replaced by the unmistakable stench of reality. Picture a medieval festival minus the fun, and add a generous helping of grime. Welcome to ground zero for your holy war experience, a place where the glamour of knighthood meets the everyday chaos of trying not to catch something fatal. First off, let's tackle the medieval hygiene situation. Spoiler alert, it's not great. Forget about those shining knights with flowing locks you've seen in movies. In truth, you're more likely to find a knight with a greasy mop of hair and a layer of dirt that could double as camouflage. Bathing. Not high on the list when you're trying to conserve water for drinking, if you can even find it. You might get a chance to dunk in a river now and then, but let's be real, that's a glorified rinse at best. And while we're on the subject of necessities, let's talk toilets, or rather the lack thereof. The latrine situation in camp is, how do we put this delicately, primitive. Dig a trench, do your business, and cover it up. Not exactly the kind of thing you put in a recruitment brochure, is it? Now, what do you eat to keep that knightly physique in top form? Brace yourself for Medieval Master Chef, Crusader Edition. Your diet is far from the feasts depicted in tapestries. Think hardtack biscuits that could double as coasters, salt pork that's seen better days, and the occasional bit of foraged greenery if you're lucky. If you're really living large, you might have access to some dried peas or beans. Let's not forget the wine, which isn't so much a treat as a necessity, because drinking the water is like playing Russian roulette with your intestines. But nights in the field aren't just about battle and bad food. There's downtime too, though it's not exactly spent lounging in silk robes. Picture a medieval frat house, complete with all the wholesome activities. Dice games, storytelling, maybe even a friendly bout of wrestling to blow off steam. Chess is a favorite among the more cerebral types, a game that's as much about strategy as it is about passing the endless hours. Now, let's talk morale, because keeping spirits up in this stew of discomfort is a full-time job. Sure, you're here for pious reasons, or at least that's what you tell yourself when the going gets tough. But really, the camaraderie is what keeps you going. The brotherhood forged in the furnace of shared hardship is a powerful thing. You're in this together, for better or worse, and that bond is what makes the whole mess bearable. And amidst all this, let's not forget the occasional burst of entertainment from traveling minstrels or the odd juggler who wanders into camp. They might not be headlining acts at the medieval equivalent of Cele, but they provide a welcome distraction from the grinding monotony and looming danger. But let's not sugarcoat it. The life of a knight on campaign is no picnic. It's a constant struggle against the elements, the enemy, and your own expectations. The romantic notion of charging into battle with a gleaming sword is tempered by the harsh reality of blisters, exhaustion, and the ever-present threat of disease. Dysentery, typhoid, and scurvy are just a few of the uninvited guests at this medieval party. And then there are the skirmishes, the bread and butter of crusading life. Forget about the grand battles depicted in art and literature. Most of your time is spent in small-scale encounters, raiding parties, and tactical maneuvers. It's less about heroics and more about survival, cunning, and the occasional stroke of luck. Yet despite all the grit and grime, there's something undeniably compelling about this life. Maybe it's the sense of purpose, the thrill of danger, or the simple satisfaction of being part of something bigger than yourself. Whatever it is, it keeps you moving forward, one step at a time, through mud and blood and the relentless march of history. So here you are, a knight in the camp of a crusading army, living a life that's far more complex and messy than the tales would have you believe. It's a world of contradictions, glory and squalor, faith and folly, idealism and raw human survival. And like it or not, you're right in the middle of it, making history with every choice, every step, and every swing of your sword. As the sun sets over the camp, casting long shadows across the tents, you find a moment of quiet reflection, wondering what tomorrow will bring. Another day, another challenge, another chance to prove yourself. In this crucible of chaos and camaraderie, you're not just surviving, you're living the legend, one imperfect day at a time. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting an amber glow over the camp, the anticipation crackles like static in the air. You know tomorrow isn't just another day of gnawing on hardtack and dodging dysentery. Nope, this time. You're about to dive headfirst into the real deal, a skirmish. Let's dispel any illusions right away. This isn't a choreographed dance of noble duels, but more like a chaotic marsh pit with lethal consequences. You're not gearing up for some grandiose battle where you'll be remembered as a hero in shining armor. Oh no, this is a medieval bar fight on steroids, and you're just one of the many swinging a sharpened stick. Forget the tales of knights saving damsels or exchanging chivalrous blows with rival champions. The reality, less elegance, more survival instinct. First, let's talk tactics. The battlefield isn't some carefully drawn map with neat little lines and labels. It's a mess of dirt, sweat, and adrenaline. Commanders shout orders that get lost in the cacophony of clanging metal and panicked horses. If you're lucky, you'll catch a glimpse of your banner flapping in the chaos, a ragged lifeline in the storm. The strategy is simple. Don't die. Now, weapons. You've got your trusty sword, which you paid a small fortune for, as we've covered. But let's be real, this isn't some Excalibur meant to make you king of anything. It's a tool, one that's probably been dulled by the sheer number of times it's met another blade. You might also wield a lance, which sounds impressive until you realize it's only useful in the first charge. After that, it splinters and panic. And then there's the armor. Ah, the glamorous clank of metal that weighs more than a teenage elephant. You're essentially a medieval tin can, and while it offers some protection, it doesn't make you invincible. Arrows, axes, and sheer brute force can, and will, find the chinks in your armor. The average suit of plate armor weighs around 60 pounds, which is great for building those leg muscles, but not so fantastic for agility. As for strategy, well, if you're picturing some elaborate chess match, think again. The Crusades weren't about intricate military maneuvers. They were about brute force and overwhelming numbers. Picture a rugby scrum, but with swords and significantly higher stakes. The goal is to push the enemy back, break their lines, and hope you're not the one left bleeding in the dirt. Now, onto the myth of knightly honor. If you're expecting a jousting tournament where everyone plays by the rules, you're in for a rude awakening. Chivalry might be the code, but survival is the game. In the heat of battle, it's less about the noble exchange of blows and more about who can swing faster and harder. Sure, there are moments of valor, knights rescuing fallen comrades or leading daring charges, but these are exceptions, not the rule. The reality is a melee, a chaotic swirl of clashing swords, shouting men, and the ever-present stench of fear. You're not dueling a single opponent. You're fighting to stay upright amid a sea of humanity, each person as desperate to live as you are. Forget the romantic notion of locking eyes with your foe before engaging in combat. You're more likely to be blindsided by a foot soldier with an axe who's just as eager to make it home as you are. And oh, the noise. A medieval battle is a cacophony of clashing metal. the thud of bodies hitting the ground, and the screams of the wounded. It's like being stuck in the world's worst metal concert, with none of the glam and all of the danger. The chaos is disorienting, and your senses are overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it all. It's not just a test of strength, but of mental endurance. Amidst this pandemonium, you might catch a glimpse of your fellow knights, their faces grim and determined. There's a certain camaraderie in the madness, a shared understanding that you're all in this together. And while it's far from the glorified tales of brotherhood, there's a bond forged in the crucible of battle that's difficult to break. Yet, despite the brutality, there's a strange allure to it all. The adrenaline, the high stakes, the sense of being part of something larger than yourself. It's intoxicating. This is what you trained for, what you mortgaged your future for. In the midst of the melee, there's an undeniable thrill, a rush that's as much about survival as it is about victory. As the dust begins to settle and the chaos subsides, you take stock of the battlefield. The ground is littered with the detritus of war, broken weapons, discarded armor, and the bodies of those who weren't as lucky. You've survived another day, another skirmish, and with that comes a mix of relief and exhaustion. But there's no time for rest. As night falls and the campfires flicker to life, you find yourself surrounded by the weary faces of your comrades. There's a solemnity in the air, a recognition of what's been lost and what's been won. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new battles, and the relentless march of history. For now, you take solace in the warmth of the fire and the camaraderie of those who have fought by your side. As you drift into an uneasy sleep, the reality of your life as a knight is clearer than ever. It's not the stuff of legend, but of grit, determination, and the unyielding will to survive. And if there's glory to be found, it's in the simple act of making it through another day, against all odds. As dawn seeps through the cracks in your tent, you wake with a newfound appreciation for the fact that you're still breathing. Yesterday's skirmish might have been a brutal reminder of the chaos of war, but it also underscores a bigger picture. You're a small cog in the grand and grinding wheel of history. The Crusades, for all their bloodshed and bluster, aren't just about knights and battles. They're about power plays on a scale that's almost dizzying. So, let's talk legacy. The Crusades kicked off in 1095 with Pope Urban Roman II rallying cry, promising salvation and spoils, and they stretched on for about 2 centuries. That's right, 200 years of back-and-forth tussles over a strip of land that spawned more legends than your average medieval bard could dream up. The results? A mixed bag of cultural exchanges, economic shifts, and more than a few geopolitical headaches that resonate even into the modern era. The Crusader states, those fragile footholds in the Holy Land like the Kingdom of Jerusalem and the Principality of Antioch, were established as a result of these campaigns. They became melting pots where East met West, albeit not always harmoniously. These territories introduced European knights to the exotic wonders of the Middle East. Spices, silks, new forms of art and architecture. Suddenly, Europe was like a kid in a candy store, or in this case, a knight in a spice bazaar. Not to mention, the Crusades opened up new trade routes, laying the groundwork for the later age of exploration. But let's not kid ourselves. For all the talk of cultural exchange, the Crusades were largely a power grab, an attempt by European nobility to carve out new dominions while appeasing their religious leaders. The Byzantine Empire, which initially called for help against the Seljuks, found itself caught between a rock and a hard place, sometimes benefiting from the Crusaders' presence, other times suffering from their unpredictability and outright hostility. Back home, the Crusades had a seismic impact on the feudal system. Many knights who survived the campaigns returned with newfound wealth and land, shaking up the social hierarchy like a medieval game of Jenga. Some returned empty-handed, their fortunes squandered on what turned out to be a very long, very expensive field trip. And let's not forget the role of the Church, which came out of this whole ordeal with its coffers significantly richer, thanks to the countless donations and taxes levied in the name of holy war. Now, about those romanticized tales of chivalry. The reality of knightly life was often brutish, with more mud than medals. Yet the stories persisted and evolved, turning knights into the action heroes of medieval legends. This was a time when troubadours sang of noble deeds, and the tales of valor and courtly love became the blockbuster hits of their day. The truth, however, was much less glamorous. Imagine spending weeks in damp clothes, with a diet that made even the most basic modern meal seem like a feast. Yet the allure of knighthood endured, a testament to humanity's love for a good story. The ongoing fascination with the Crusades and their knightly participants speaks to a broader human tendency to romanticize the past. We remember the grand gestures and noble intentions, often glossing over the grit and grime. Today's tales of knights in shining armor are a testament to our desire for heroes, even if those heroes were more like muddy, overworked soldiers just trying to survive another day. The Crusades also left a lasting impression on the Middle East. They entrenched a legacy of mistrust between Christians and Muslims, a historical undercurrent that has ebbed and flowed over the centuries. The region, once a tapestry of diverse cultures and religions, became a battleground of ideologies and territorial claims, a situation that will be echoed in various forms throughout history. As for the knights themselves, their legacy is a complicated tapestry of glory and brutality. They were both destroyers and builders, marauders and mentors, driven by faith, greed, or simply the promise of adventure. Their stories teach us about the duality of human ambition, how the quest for glory can lead to both triumph and tragedy. So, where does all this leave us? The Crusades, with their blend of idealism and opportunism, remind us of the complexities of human nature. They were a collision of cultures, a crucible of conflict that reshaped continents. The knights who rode into battle were not just mythic figures, but real people, flawed, driven, and undeniably human. Their stories are a mirror reflecting our own struggles with power, identity, and the eternal search for meaning in a chaotic world. And as you sit there, pondering the dusty remnants of history, you realize that the legacy of the Crusades is not just about what was gained or lost, but about the stories we choose to tell. It's about how we shape our understanding of the past to make sense of the present. So, while the tales of knights might be embroidered with legend, they remain a vital thread in the rich, entangled fabric of history. In the end, the Crusades are a testament to the enduring complexity of the human story. They remind us that history is not just a series of dates and events, but a tapestry of human experiences, each thread intertwined with ambition, belief, and the relentless march of time. As you reflect on the journey of the knights, you see them for what they truly were, pilgrims on a quest, not just for earthly rewards, but for a place in the annals of history. And in their stories, we find our own reflections, a reminder that the past is never truly past, but a living part of who we are today. With a final glance at the horizon, you pack away these thoughts, ready to face whatever tomorrow brings. The knightly journey might be one of hardship and heroics, but it's also a journey of discovery, of ourselves, our history, and the endless possibilities that lie ahead. In the grand tapestry of human history, few stories are as mesmerizing as that of ancient Egypt. It's a tale that kicks off around 3100 BCE with a guy named Nama, who probably didn't have a YouTube channel, but would have been a viral sensation if he did. Nama, sometimes called Menes, is the dude credited with uniting Upper and Lower Egypt. And no, this isn't about an awkward high school reunion. This was the birth of a powerhouse civilization. Imagine, if you will, a land divided by the Nile, practically begging for a leader with a grand vision, a strong arm, and a penchant for wearing snazzy headgear. Nama's claim to fame was more than just geographical matchmaking. His unification of Egypt marked the beginning of the first dynasty, and with it, the dawn of pharaonic rule. You see, before Nama, Upper and Lower Egypt were like two bickering siblings, constantly at odds. He brought them together, not with a peace treaty or a catchy slogan, but with a mix of military might and political savvy. His name might not be on the latest Forbes list, but his achievements were immortalized on the Nama palette, a 5,000-year-old ancient Egyptian artifact that's basically the world's oldest commemorative plaque. But why is unification such a big deal, you might ask? Well, uniting Upper and Lower Egypt was akin to merging two competitive tech startups without a single Zoom call. By bringing together these regions, Nama set the stage for a civilization that would last for millennia. It meant centralized power, streamlined resources, and a united front to tackle the whims of nature and neighboring invaders. Speaking of nature, let's not forget the Nile, the real MVP of ancient Egypt. Nile wasn't just a river. It was the ancient equivalent of a Swiss Army knife. It provided water, fertile soil, and a means of transportation that was as reliable as a Swiss train schedule. The Nile's predictable flooding was essentially the world's first dependable calendar. Every year, like clockwork, the river would overflow its banks, depositing nutrient-rich silt onto the farmlands. This annual inundation allowed Egyptians to cultivate crops like wheat and barley, feeding a growing population and enabling the kind of economic stability that would make modern-day central banks envious. This stability was crucial because it gave the pharaohs the time and resources to focus on more glamorous pursuits, like building pyramids and commissioning massive statues in their likeness. When your basic needs are met, and the Nile's doing most of the heavy lifting, why not indulge in a bit of architectural one-upmanship? It's important to note that the Nile wasn't just a river, it was practically a deity. The Egyptians had a love affair with it that would put any modern influencer's relationship with their Instagram account to shame. They revered it, wrote hymns about it, and even personified it in the form of Happy, the god of the inundation. This reverence underscores how crucial the Nile was to their way of life. It wasn't just about survival. It was about thriving in a landscape that could be unforgiving without the river's lifeline. But let's get back to the pharaohs, those ancient rulers who were treated like living gods. Thanks to the Nile's bounty and Nama's unification, the pharaohs could rise to a god-like status. And let's be honest, who wouldn't want to be considered a deity in their lifetime? Imagine having people build you a pyramid just because you happen to be good at organizing a couple of provinces. The pharaohs claimed divine right, which was a pretty sweet gig if you could get it. They were seen as intermediaries between the gods and the people, which meant that their word was law, literally. This divine status was no small potatoes. It allowed the pharaohs to mobilize resources across the vast Egyptian territory, constructing monumental architecture that has withstood the test of time. The pyramids at Giza, for instance, weren't just extravagant tombs. They were statements of divine power, designed to ensure the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife was as grand as their reign on earth. And while it's tempting to romanticize these rulers as benevolent god-kings, the reality was a bit more complex. Pharaohs wielded absolute power, and their reigns were often marked by intrigue, betrayal, and the occasional familial squabble that would make a soap opera seem tame. But these leaders were shrewd, using religion as a tool to legitimize their rule. They understood that controlling the narrative was key, and they crafted a divine image that kept the populace in awe, and more importantly, in line. So there you have it, a world born from unification, nurtured by a river, and ruled by men who claimed the divine right. As we delve deeper into the world of the pharaohs, remember that beneath the grandeur and myth lies a story of power, strategy, and dare we say, a bit of ancient flair. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the power dynamics of these god-kings and the civilization they built, a saga that, much like the sands of Egypt, is ever-shifting yet enduring. While the pharaohs basked in their divine glow, let's not forget that these weren't just guys with fancy hats and a knack for delegation. They were the architects of a society where spirituality and governance were two sides of the same gilded coin. Sure, pyramids were the ultimate flex. Imagine a tombstone so big it can be seen from space. But they were also a testament to a theocratic society where pharaohs were seen as gods on earth. And let's face it, when your boss is a living deity, the office politics get a whole lot more interesting. Now, let's talk about the real costs of these monumental projects, which makes today's infrastructure budgets look like pocket change. The Great Pyramid of Giza, a marvel of ancient engineering, wasn't just a weekend DIY project. Its construction took around 20 years and required approximately 3 million blocks of stone, each weighing between 5 to 15 tons. That's right, tons, not pounds, because why go small when you're building a stairway to heaven? But before we start picturing a harmonious gathering of ancient Egyptians coming together like a prehistoric habitat for humanity build, let's get real about labor. The romantic notion of thousands of free-willed citizens volunteering for pyramid duty is a bedtime story for the gullible. The workforce was composed mainly of conscripted laborers, and not slaves, contrary to popular myths. These workers, numbering in the tens of thousands, lived in temporary cities near the construction site. Archaeological evidence suggests they were well-fed and housed, which was a pretty sweet deal for the time. Just don't confuse that with freedom of choice. These laborers were organized into teams of 20, each with their own supervisors and skilled craftsmen. And no, there weren't any alien foremen on the payroll. The logistics behind moving those massive stones was all human ingenuity. They used sledges, lubricated with water, to drag the blocks across the desert sands. This wasn't just muscle and might. It was math and planning on a scale that would impress even the most seasoned project manager. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, or in this case, the spaceship. While it might be fun to imagine little green men lending a hand, the truth is far more grounded. The ancient Egyptians left behind plenty of evidence of their construction techniques, and aliens didn't make the cut. They had a knack for engineering that was, quite literally, out of this world. They invented simple machines like levers and ramps to achieve feats that still baffle modern engineers. Beyond being colossal tombs, these pyramids were the ultimate propaganda tools. In a world without Twitter or state-run media, a giant stone triangle was the perfect way to announce your godlike status. They were designed to dazzle and intimidate, to remind everyone of the pharaoh's divine connection and his ability to command the forces of nature and humanity alike. Each pyramid was aligned with the cardinal points, a cosmic statement that this ruler wasn't just playing at being a god. He was one. Speaking of costs, let's not forget the economic impact of these construction projects. They were a drain on resources, but also a stimulus for the economy. The need for materials and manpower created a ripple effect that boosted trade and agriculture. The state orchestrated this massive undertaking with the precision of a maestro conducting an orchestra, ensuring that the economy thrived even as it was stretched to its limits. In this society, where the divine and the mundane walked hand in hand, the pharaoh was more than a ruler. He was the linchpin holding together the cosmic order. To the average Egyptian, this was a world where the gods pulled the strings, and the pharaoh was their earthly puppet master. This blend of spirituality and statecraft was the glue that held ancient Egypt together, a delicate balance of power and piety that would persist for thousands of years. As we continue to unravel the story of these early dynastic pharaohs, remember that every stone in those pyramids tells a tale of ambition and audacity. The early pharaohs weren't just building tombs. They were constructing their legacy, ensuring that their names would echo through eternity. And while we may chuckle at the idea of a living god with a penchant for stone triangles, there's no denying the genius and tenacity of a civilization that dared to dream big, and then made those dreams a reality, one massive stone block at a time. As we chisel into the narrative of ancient Egypt, we find ourselves standing at the threshold of the Middle Kingdom, often lauded as the Golden Age. But before you start picturing a utopian society where everyone was sipping ambrosia by the Nile, let's pump the brakes and get real. Sure, the Middle Kingdom was a time when art, culture, and architecture flourished, but it was also a period of bureaucratic expansion that would make today's red tape look like child's play. Enter the scribes, the unsung heroes of ancient Egyptian administration and the original office warriors. Forget your modern-day 9-to-5 grind. These guys were the backbone of a sprawling bureaucracy that kept the gears of the Egyptian state well-oiled and running. They were the clerical elite, wielding reeds instead of pens and papyrus instead of paper. These scribes were responsible for everything from recording taxes to drafting royal decrees, essentially making them the ancient world's version of data analysts. The demand for scribes was so high that it became a career path touted by every parent who wanted their child to have a real job. Inscriptions from the era reveal a not-so-subtle propaganda campaign extolling the virtues of a scribe's life. An ancient version of you should really go into law or medicine. But let's not romanticize it too much. While scribes enjoyed a certain level of prestige, their work was meticulous and never-ending, involving so much hieroglyphic paperwork that it would make even the most seasoned bureaucrat break into a cold sweat. Now, let's talk about the pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom, who were not only kings, but also savvy diplomats. They understood that to maintain power, they needed to expand Egypt's influence beyond its borders. Through a blend of international diplomacy and trade, these pharaohs began weaving Egypt into the broader tapestry of the ancient world. They traded with the Levant, Nubia, and even ventured into the Aegean, exchanging luxury goods like gold, papyrus, and linen for foreign treasures. Of course, trade wasn't just about acquiring shiny objects. It was a strategic move to bolster Egypt's economy and secure alliances. The pharaohs were laying the groundwork for a more interconnected ancient world, one barter at a time. This network of trade routes not only brought wealth into Egypt, but also allowed for the exchange of ideas and technology, creating a cultural melting pot that enriched Egyptian society. But let's not forget that while the elite were busy with diplomacy and trade, the average Egyptian was toiling away under the relentless sun. For the common folk, life was less golden and more of a grueling slog. Most Egyptians were farmers, tied to the land and dependent on the annual flooding of the Nile to nourish their crops. This was backbreaking work, and there were no labor unions or weekends to offer respite. The romantic notion of a pastoral life by the Nile River is as much a myth as Cleopatra's beauty regimen. Daily life was dictated by the seasons, and while the Nile's flooding was a blessing, it was also a potential disaster if the waters rose too high or too low. The reality for many was a life of toil and uncertainty, far removed from the splendor of the pharaoh's courts. The Middle Kingdom also saw a rise in the construction of massive fortresses and temples, funded by the state's coffers. These projects weren't just about religious devotion. They were jobs programs on an ancient scale, designed to keep the populace busy and the economy humming. It was a clever strategy, providing employment while also reinforcing the pharaoh's divine image through monumental architecture. But let's not get too misty-eyed about the grandeur. These projects were also a testament to the state's control over its people, mobilizing thousands of laborers to work on colossal undertakings that symbolized the pharaoh's divine power and earthly ambition. The construction of these structures was a logistical marvel, requiring an army of workers, craftsmen, and engineers who were meticulously organized to achieve feats that still boggle the mind. Yet, even with all this progress and opulence, the Middle Kingdom faced its share of challenges. Internal strife, power struggles, and the occasional bout of famine were constant threats lurking beneath the surface of this supposed golden age. The pharaohs had to navigate these treacherous waters with a mix of diplomacy, military prowess, and a touch of divine intervention, at least in the eyes of the populace. The appeal of the Middle Kingdom as a golden era lies in its cultural and artistic achievements, which were undeniably impressive. Literature flourished, with works like The Tale of Sinu and the Instructions of a Menimhat, offering glimpses into the complexities of Egyptian society. These texts reveal a world where loyalty, morality, and the divine right of kings were hot topics, debated and explored with a sophistication that still resonates today. As we wrap up this leg of our journey, remember that the Middle Kingdom was a time of contrasts, a golden age for some, a daily grind for others. It was a period where art and culture reached new heights, but also a time when the state's reach extended into every corner of life, from the grand palaces of the pharaohs to the humble homes of the laborers. In this world of contradictions, the pharaohs were more than just rulers. They were the architects of an empire, navigating the complexities of power with a deft hand. They laid the foundations for a society that, despite its challenges, continued to thrive and evolve, leaving a legacy that would echo through the annals of history. As we prepare to dive deeper into the saga of these ancient rulers, remember that every stroke of a scribe's brush, every trade agreement, and every stone laid was a step in the grand dance of history, a dance that continues to captivate and inspire to this day. Now, as we embark on the new kingdom, strap in for the ride, because this is Egypt's greatest hits album. Think of it as the Now That's What I Call Ancient Egypt compilation, featuring chart toppers like Ramses Roman II and Hatshepsut. But before you get swept away by the dazzling pyramids and colossal statues, let's peek behind the curtain to see what was really going on. First up, Ramses Roman II, also known as Ramses the Great, a man whose progeny could populate a small nation. With around 100 children, he was the ancient world's version of a reality TV star, minus the tabloid scandals. Ramses ruled for 66 years, from 1279 to 1213 BCE, and during his reign, he was the epitome of go big or go home. His legacy is as grand as the monuments he left behind, like the famous temples at Abu Simbel. These were strategically relocated in the 1960s to avoid being submerged by the Nile. Talk about a moving story. But don't let Ramses' prolific building and parenting fool you into thinking his reign was all sunshine and hieroglyphs. His military campaigns were about as subtle as a chariot in a china shop. Ramses' most famous battle was the Battle of Kadesh, fought against the Hittites around 1274 BCE. This clash of titans was one of the largest chariot battles of its time, involving over 5,000 chariots. Ramses claimed a glorious victory, but historians suspect it was more of a stalemate. It's like that friend who insists they won every game of Monopoly, even when you distinctly remember them flipping the board in a rage. Now, let's talk about Hatshepsut, Egypt's first great female pharaoh, who decided that gender norms were merely suggestions. Ruling from 1479 to 1458 BCE, she rocked the royal boat by donning the full pharaoh regalia, fake beard included. Her reign was marked by peace and prosperity, not to mention a little something called the Punt Expedition. This journey to the land of Punt, rich in myrrh and incense, was more than just a shopping spree. It was a diplomatic and economic triumph. Hatshepsut's reign was a masterclass in PR. She knew that to maintain power in a patriarchal society, she had to craft an image that was larger than life. Her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri is a testament to her architectural and political genius. And let's not forget her decision to portray herself as a male in statues and inscriptions, an ancient marketing strategy that would make modern spin doctors swoon. Speaking of PR, the New Kingdom pharaohs were the original influencers, using religion to reinforce their divine status. Temples like Karnak and Luxor were more than just places of worship. They were the pharaohs' Instagram profiles, showcasing their connection to the gods. The priests played their part too, ensuring that the divine narrative was well maintained and the pharaoh's godlike image remained untarnished. But let's not sugarcoat it. This divine image wasn't all incense and lotus flowers. It was also about control through fear. Statues and obelisks weren't just decorative. They were constant reminders of the pharaoh's power. Imagine living in a world where the government has literal stone-carved reminders of its authority scattered across the land. The grandeur of these monuments was matched only by the pharaoh's determination to maintain order. Now, let's dive into the military expansions that turned Egypt into the Walmart of the ancient world, everywhere, but not always beloved. The New Kingdom was a period of unprecedented territorial expansion. Under Pharaoh Thutmose III, Egypt's borders stretched from the Euphrates in the north to Nubia in the south. This wasn't just about land grabbing, it was about securing resources and trade routes. The Egyptian military was a well-oiled machine, with chariots as the ancient equivalent of tanks. Their campaigns were as much about psychological warfare as they were about physical dominance. The pharaohs used their victories to send a clear message. Egypt was a superpower, and you'd better play nice if you wanted a piece of the prosperity pie. But being the big kid on the block came with its own set of challenges. The wealth and resources of the New Kingdom made Egypt a target for envy and aggression. The Hittites, the Mitanni, and later the Sea Peoples all took turns trying to knock Egypt off its pedestal. It was a time when alliances were as fragile as papyrus, and one wrong move could lead to chaos. Despite the looming threat of invasion, Egypt's economy flourished. Trade networks expanded, bringing exotic goods from as far as Crete and the Aegean. Gold from Nubia, cedar from Lebanon, and lapis lazuli from Afghanistan filled the treasuries. This economic prosperity funded the construction of temples and tombs that remain architectural marvels to this day. Now, while the New Kingdom pharaohs were busy playing the Game of Thrones on a grand scale, the average Egyptian was living a life that was, shall we say, less glamorous. The vast majority were farmers, craftsmen, and laborers who kept the wheels of the economy turning. For them, the pharaoh's divine status was both a source of pride and a reminder of their own insignificance. Life for these everyday Egyptians was dictated by the whims of the Nile and the demands of the state. Taxes were collected in grain, and labor was often compulsory, especially for large state projects. While the pyramids were no longer in vogue, the construction of grand temples and royal tombs provided employment and ensured the continuation of the pharaoh's legacy. In this world, where the divine and the earthly intersected, the pharaoh was the linchpin. He was the intermediary between the gods and the people, the keeper of Mad, the cosmic order. Maintaining this balance was no small feat, and the pharaohs used every tool at their disposal, from military might to religious propaganda, to keep the scales from tipping. As we continue unraveling the saga of the New Kingdom, remember that behind every monument and inscription is a story of power, ambition, and human ingenuity. The pharaohs of this era were more than just rulers. They were the architects of a civilization that, while not without its flaws, remains one of the most remarkable in human history. So, hold onto your canopic jars, because the tale of Egypt's golden age is far from over. Stay tuned as we continue to explore the highs and lows of this ancient superpower, where every pharaoh's reign was a chapter in the grand narrative of history. As we continue unraveling the saga of the New Kingdom, remember that behind every monument and inscription is a story of power, ambition, and human ingenuity. But as with all great civilizations, Egypt's golden age was not immune to the sands of time, and the pharaohs would soon find themselves on a slippery slope, with the grandeur of their reigns giving way to a cocktail of internal chaos and external threats. Let's fast forward to the late period of Egyptian history, where things got as tangled as a ball of yarn in a cat's paws. The once mighty Egypt, which had strutted across the ancient world like a peacock in full plume, found itself mired in a quagmire of economic woes and political infighting. The pharaoh's divine glow began to flicker, obscured by the shadows of debt and disunity. With the treasury looking more barren than a desert mirage, the state struggled to fund grand building projects and maintain its military might. Internal problems were only part of the story. Externally, Egypt was becoming the ancient world's equivalent of a piñata, battered by foreign powers eager to take a swing. First, there were the Assyrians, who gave Egypt a taste of their military prowess. Then came the Persians, who added Egypt to their empire like it was just another trophy on the shelf. But the final curtain call came courtesy of Rome, a civilization that approached empire building with the enthusiasm of a kid in a candy store. And then there's Cleopatra Roman 7, the last pharaoh of Egypt, whose story is a real page-turner. Forget the image of a seductive femme fatale. Cleopatra was a shrewd political operator. Her famous liaisons with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony were less about candlelit dinners and more about power plays. Cleopatra, ruling from 51 to 30 BCE, was determined to restore Egypt's glory and independence, using her alliances with Rome's heavy hitters to keep her country's head above water. Her romance with Caesar wasn't just a love story, it was a strategic partnership. Cleopatra knew that aligning with Rome's most powerful man could secure her throne and safeguard Egypt's interests. After Caesar's assassination, she turned her attention to Mark Antony, another Roman powerhouse. Their relationship was a complex blend of passion and politics, culminating in the ill-fated Battle of Actium in 31 BCE. Cleopatra and Antony's forces were defeated by Octavian, later Augustus, and with their loss, Egypt's fate was sealed. In 30 BCE, Cleopatra and Antony's deaths marked the end of an era. Egypt was absorbed into the Roman Empire, and Cleopatra's son with Caesar, Caesarion, was executed. This was the curtain fall on the pharaonic age, a dramatic finale to a civilization that had once been the envy of the world. But why does the image of the pharaohs continue to enthrall us today? Perhaps it's the mystery of their monumental achievements, the pyramids that defy time, the hieroglyphs that speak a language lost to most of us. Or maybe it's the allure of their godlike status, a power so absolute that it feels otherworldly in our democratic age. Even the myths, like the infamous mummy's curse, contribute to the mystique. Hollywood's fascination with cursed tombs and vengeful spirits might be fiction, but they speak to a deeper human fascination with the unknown and the eternal. The legacy of the pharaohs is a testament to the human spirit's capacity for ambition and creativity. They remind us of a time when religion, politics, and culture were intertwined in a way that shaped the course of history. Their story is a blend of romance and reality, a narrative that captures the imagination while grounding us in the harshness of human endeavor. So, what can modern politics learn from the pharaohs? Well, besides the fact that nobody wants to be buried under a pyramid of paperwork, there's a lesson in the balance of power and purpose. The pharaohs understood the importance of a cohesive narrative, a vision that aligned the divine with the earthly. They knew that to rule effectively, They needed to command not just the land, but the hearts and minds of their people. Moreover, the Pharaohs' rise and fall underscore the importance of adaptability and resilience in leadership. They remind us that empires, no matter how mighty, are not immune to the shifting tides of history. A lesson perhaps worth heeding in today's ever-evolving global landscape. As we wrap up this journey through the sands of time, remember that the story of the Pharaohs is not just a chapter in the history books. It's a mirror reflecting the complexities of human ambition, the interplay of power and belief, and the enduring quest for legacy. It's a story that, much like the Nile itself, continues to flow through the annals of history, shaping the world in ways both visible and unseen. So, as we say farewell to the Pharaohs, let's carry forward their lessons, and perhaps a touch of their grandeur in our own narratives. In the bustling marketplace of history, the Gupta Empire stands out like a particularly savvy vendor, quietly hawking its wares while other empires bellow and flaunt. Picture this. It's around 320 CE, and in the northern reaches of the Indian subcontinent, a new power is rising that would give any modern-day economist a run for their money. Enter Chandragupta I, a ruler whose political maneuvers were slick enough to make even Machiavelli nod in appreciation. This guy knew how to play the game. Now, let's talk geography for a moment. The Guptas were situated in a prime piece of real estate, northern India. This wasn't just any patch of land. It was a crossroads of culture and commerce. Think of it like Times Square, but instead of neon lights and tourist traps, you had a vibrant exchange of goods, ideas, and a little bit of philosophizing for good measure. The strategic location meant that the Gupta Empire was not just a political powerhouse, but also a cultural and economic hub. Trade routes crisscrossed the empire like a latticework, bringing in everything from silk to spices, and with them, the latest gossip and innovations from distant lands. For those who think ancient empires were just about swords and sandals, let's dive into something that might sound as thrilling as a tax return, the Gupta fiscal system. But hold on, because this is where things get interesting. The Guptas managed their finances with a deftness that would make your local accountant weep with jealousy. Their tax system was fair, efficient, and left enough in the hands of the people to keep them from revolting. They levied taxes on land, but also on water and trade, ensuring a steady flow of revenue without draining their subjects dry. If only certain modern governments took a leaf out of their palm leaf manuscripts, we might all be a bit less frazzled come tax season. And let's not forget the founding fathers of this empire. Besides Chandragupta I, there was Samudragupta, who was less about the paperwork and more about expanding the family business by conquering neighboring territories. But here's where the myth-busting kicks in. While ancient texts sing of his military prowess like he was some kind of subcontinental Alexander, it's wise to remember that history has a way of amplifying the deeds of those with the biggest armies or the best PR. Sure, Samudragupta was a force to be reckoned with, but his real genius lay in his ability to consolidate power and keep the empire running like a well-oiled chariot. Now, why does all this matter? The Gupta Empire wasn't just a flash in the pan of history. Its innovations in governance, trade, and culture set the stage for a golden age that would influence generations to come. The Guptas understood that power wasn't just about military might. It was about creating a stable, prosperous society where arts and sciences could flourish. They turned their empire into a beacon of stability and enlightenment, at least as much as any empire could in an age that still believed thunder was the god's way of playing the drums a little too loudly. In a world where empires rose and fell like waves on a stormy sea, the Gupta Empire stood out for its balance and sophistication. It was an empire that knew how to adjust its sails to the prevailing winds, whether those winds were political, economic, or cultural. So, the next time you see a headline about some new economic theory or political strategy, tip your hat to the Guptas. They might just have done it first, and with a flair that would put today's policy wonks to shame. While the Gupta Empire was mixing cocktails of political savvy and economic strategy, it was also stirring up a potent brew of intellectual dynamism that would make even the ancient Greeks raise an eyebrow. At the heart of this intellectual renaissance was mathematics. Now, before your eyes glaze over at the thought of endless equations, let's bring in Aryabhata, the rock-star mathematician of his era. Born in 476 CE, Aryabhata was the kind of guy who would casually introduce the concept of zero and toss around the value of pi like confetti at a parade. This wasn't just math, it was a cultural revolution. Imagine introducing zero, not just as a placeholder, but as a number with its own identity. It was as if Aryabhata had discovered the mathematical equivalent of discovering fire. And let's talk about pi, a number that still haunts the dreams of high school students today. Aryabhata calculated it to 4 decimal places, 1,416, without the benefit of a calculator or even a handy abacus app. His work didn't just stop at numbers. He also dabbled in astronomy, proposing that the Earth spins on its axis and estimating the length of the solar year to within a few minutes of our current calculations. Not bad for a guy working with palm leaves and ink parts. This intellectual explosion wasn't happening in a vacuum. The Gupta Empire provided the societal stability that allowed such scholarly pursuits to flourish. Education was highly valued, and the empire was dotted with institutions akin to modern universities. Nalanda, one of the most famous, attracted students and scholars from as far afield as Persia and China. They came not just for the math, but for a full buffet of learning, philosophy, medicine, and even the arts. Speaking of the arts, if you thought Netflix was the first to binge-watch worthy dramas, think again. Enter Kalidasa, the Shakespeare of ancient India. His plays were the cultural events of their time, and his work was as popular as any modern-day streaming series. Take Shakuntala, a romantic drama that would make any soap opera fan swoon. It had everything: love, betrayal, a lost ring, and a happy ending. Kalidasa's use of Sanskrit wasn't just highbrow, it was the language of the literate elite, and his mastery helped cement it as the lingua franca of the cultured. Sanskrit wasn't just a tool for storytelling, it was the language in which the philosophical and scientific ideas of the time were discussed and debated. The Gupta period saw a significant evolution in the use of Sanskrit, elevating it to a level of sophistication that matched Latin in medieval Europe. It was the bridge between the past and the future, connecting the ancient Vedic texts with new ideas emerging from the minds of Gupta scholars. And let's not forget the visual arts. Gupta sculpture and architecture were no less impressive, characterized by their intricate details and graceful lines. The temples and monuments built during this time, like those at Sanchai and Ajanta, were not just places of worship. They were masterpieces in stone and paint, telling stories of gods, heroes, and the daily life of the people. These works weren't just about religious devotion. They were expressions of human experience, capturing the complexities of life with an elegance that spoke to the sophistication of Gupta society. But before we get swept away by the romance of the Gupta Renaissance, let's play the myth-busting card. While the empire was indeed a cradle of innovation, it wasn't all peace, love, and enlightenment. The Guptas, like any ruling dynasty, had their share of political intrigues and social stratifications. The intellectual elite were just that, elite. Literacy and access to education were privileges of the upper echelons of society, leaving the majority of the population to toil in agrarian anonymity. The romantic image of a universally enlightened society was just that, an image, not quite the reality for the average Gupta subject. In the grand tapestry of history, the Gupta Empire's contributions to mathematics, literature, and the arts were threads of gold. They wove a cultural fabric that would influence not just India, but the world. These achievements were a testament to what a society can accomplish when it values knowledge and creativity. Yet, it's crucial to remember that these intellectual heights were reached on the shoulders of a complex society with its own contradictions and challenges. So, while we tip our hat to the brilliance of Aryabhata, Kalidasa, and their contemporaries, let's keep an eye on the bigger picture, a world where enlightenment coexisted with inequality, and where the seeds of modernity were sown in ancient soil. As we look forward to diving deeper into the Gupta Empire's legacy, let's carry forward the notion that history is as much about the stories we tell as the facts we uncover. Because in the end, every era has its myths and realities, and the best way to understand them is to keep asking questions, challenging assumptions, and finding new ways to connect with the past. So stay tuned, because the story of the Gupta Empire is far from over, and there's plenty more to explore in this golden age of innovation and intrigue. Now, let's peel back the layers of the Gupta Empire's social fabric, a society that's often depicted through the lens of nostalgia as a harmonious utopia. Spoiler alert. It wasn't all lotus flowers and enlightenment for everyone. Behind the gleaming facade of cultural achievement was a rigid caste system that was about as unyielding as an ancient stone tablet. The Brahmins, or priests, sat pretty at the top, living the high life with their exclusive access to knowledge and religious power. Meanwhile, down at the bottom rung, the Sudras and untouchables were left to do the heavy lifting, quite literally, as they toiled in fields and performed menial tasks. It's the classic case of a few living like kings while the rest, well, just lived. The caste system wasn't just a social hierarchy, it was an economic engine. The upper classes, especially the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, benefited from a booming economy and trade, akin to a modern-day stock market surge. The Gupta administration, clever as a fox, knew that keeping the Brahmins and other upper castes content was vital to maintaining stability. They greased the wheels of power with land grants and privileges, ensuring loyalty in a way that would make any seasoned politician nod approvingly. But let's not romanticize it too much. The caste system kept the lower classes firmly in their place, creating a society where upward mobility was about as likely as finding Wi-Fi in the Himalayas. And what about the women of the Gupta Empire? The history books might not give them center stage, but they were far from silent partners in this grand historical drama. While patriarchal structures were the norm, women in the upper echelons had their fair share of influence, often acting as key advisors behind the scenes. They were the unsung strategists, the ones whispering in the ears of kings and generals. Empresses like Druvadvi and Kumaradvi were not just arm candy. They were savvy operators in the corridors of power. However, let's not get carried away with the notion of gender equality. For the majority of women, life was a daily grind, defined by household duties and restricted freedoms. Yet, even within these constraints, they found ways to shape their world, proving that resilience isn't just a modern buzzword. Religious tolerance. Now there's a phrase that gets thrown around like confetti at a political rally. In the Gupta Empire, this wasn't just a feel-good slogan. It was a pragmatic political tool. The Guptas understood that ruling a vast and diverse empire required more than military might. It demanded a deft touch in managing the myriad beliefs of its subjects. Hinduism was the dominant faith, but Buddhism and Jainism were also given room to breathe, like siblings grudgingly sharing a family car. By promoting religious harmony, the Guptas ensured that their empire didn't implode from within, a lesson some modern states might do well to remember. But let's not sugarcoat it. Religious tolerance wasn't about holding hands and singing Kumbaya. It was a calculated move to keep the peace and consolidate power. The empire's rulers knew that by respecting various faiths, they could curry favor with different communities, keeping potential unrest at bay. Think of it as an ancient game of political chess, where each move was designed to maintain the delicate balance of power. The real genius of the Guptas was their ability to master this game, creating a multifaceted society that was united, at least superficially, under their rule. As we dig deeper into the social dynamics of the Gupta Empire, it's clear that the reality was more complex than the romanticized version often portrayed. While the upper classes basked in a renaissance of art and thought, the lower classes were left to bear the brunt of social stratification. But even in this rigid structure, there were stories of resilience and ingenuity, of individuals who navigated the system to carve out their own narratives. And in the grand scheme of things, the Guptas' ability to blend cultural achievement with political acumen left an indelible mark on history, one that continues to captivate scholars and storytellers alike. In our next exploration, we'll continue to unravel the intricate tapestry of the Gupta Empire, delving into the economic strategies and innovations that underpinned their golden age. So, stay tuned as we journey through this fascinating period of history, where every twist and turn reveals new insights into the human condition and the timeless pursuit of power and progress. Now, let's turn our gaze to the buzzing market stalls of the Gupta Empire, where trade was the real rock star, cranking up the volume on their economy like a medieval stock exchange on overdrive. The Guptas knew that while swords and conquests made for great campfire stories, it was trade that truly oiled the empire's gears. This wasn't just about swapping spices and silks. It was about turning India into the Wall Street of ancient times. Imagine an empire humming with the chatter of merchants and the clinking of coins. Because yes, we're diving into the nitty-gritty of currency in a moment. The Guptas were positioned at the crossroads of several major trade routes, and they leveraged this primo location like seasoned pros. You had the Silk Road winding its way through, carrying everything from Chinese silk to Roman glassware. Meanwhile, the Indian Ocean was a maritime highway for spices, textiles, and precious stones. The empire's ports, like those at Tamralipta, were bustling with ships that connected India to the Roman Empire, Southeast Asia, and beyond, like ancient skyscrapers of commerce. Infrastructure was the backbone of this trade bonanza, and the Guptas were no slouches in this department. Their roads were the stuff of legend, stretching out like the veins of a giant circulatory system. These weren't your average dirt paths. Think more along the lines of Roman roads, but with a dash of Indian flair. They were wide, well-maintained, and lined with trees for shade, making them the ancient equivalent of a well-oiled highway system. These roads facilitated the movement of goods and ideas, and they were crucial for maintaining the empire's cohesion. Now, let's talk about the bureaucrats, those unsung pencil pushers who kept the empire running smoother than a chariot on a freshly paved road. The Guptas had an administrative machine that was as efficient as it was extensive. They implemented a system of standardized weights and measures, ensuring that merchants weren't shortchanged at the market. This level of organization meant that the empire could handle the complexities of long-distance trade without collapsing under its own weight, a feat that even some modern economies struggle with. And then there were the coins, the jingle-jangle of the Gupta economy. These weren't just bits of metal, they were the lifeblood of commerce. The Guptas issued a range of coins, from the humble copper ones to the more prestigious gold dinars. These coins were more than just currency, they were statements of power and stability. Each one was adorned with intricate designs, often showcasing the reigning monarch's likeness or a deity, serving as a reminder of the empire's glory every time someone flipped one into a merchant's hand. Coins were also a tool for propaganda, reinforcing the ruler's divine right to govern. The gold dinars, in particular, were a testament to the empire's prosperity. They signaled to the world that the Gupta Empire was not just surviving, but thriving, a message as effective as any modern-day press release. The coins facilitated trade across vast distances, acting as a universally accepted medium of exchange that tied the empire together. But let's not get too carried away with the romantic notion of a perfectly oiled economic machine. While trade brought immense wealth to the empire, it also highlighted the stark inequalities that existed within it. The riches from trade tended to pool at the top, benefiting the merchant class and the elite, while the lower echelons of society saw little of this newfound prosperity. It was a tale as old as time, the rich getting richer while the poor continued to toil. Moreover, the reliance on trade made the empire vulnerable to external shocks. A bad monsoon season could disrupt agriculture, sending ripples through the economy. Similarly, disruptions along trade routes, whether from political upheaval or pirate activity, could have significant impacts. The Guptas had to navigate these challenges with the same deftness that they applied to their political and military endeavors. The strategic use of trade extended beyond mere economic gains. It was also a tool for diplomacy and influence. By controlling the flow of goods, Guptas could extend their influence over neighboring regions without firing a single arrow. This soft power approach was a masterstroke, allowing the empire to expand its reach through means other than conquest. It's a lesson in diplomacy that modern nations could still learn from. Sometimes, the pen, or the trade agreement, is indeed mightier than the sword. As we continue to unravel the story of the Gupta Empire, it's clear that trade was more than just a means to an economic end. It was a dynamic force that shaped the empire's policies, society, and even its cultural landscape. The Guptas harnessed the power of commerce to build a legacy that would resonate through the centuries, both in India and beyond. And while their roads may have crumbled with time, the pathways they forged in trade and diplomacy remain etched in the annals of history. So, as we look ahead to the next chapter in our exploration of the Gupta Empire, let's keep in mind that the story of trade is one of both opportunity and complexity. It's a reminder of how a seemingly straightforward exchange of goods can weave a tapestry of influence and transformation. Stay tuned as we delve further into the intricacies of this golden age, where every turn unveils new facets of a remarkable era. As we stand at the precipice of the Gupta Empire's final act, it becomes clear that the end of this golden age wasn't just a dramatic fall from grace. It was a slow burn, like a candle flickering out. Picture the Huns, not just any Huns, but the White Huns, also known as the Hephthalites, sweeping down from Central Asia. These weren't your average neighbors borrowing a cup of sugar. They were more like the ultimate party crashers, determined to turn the Gupta Empire's grand gala into a historical hangover. The Huns had a knack for disruption, and when they arrived on the Indian subcontinent around the late 5th century CE, they had more than just a chaotic itinerary. These nomadic warriors were skilled horsemen and fierce fighters, the kind that could make even the toughest Gupta generals break into a cold sweat. They first breached the northern borders of the empire, and like any persistent house guest, they were hard to evict. The Gupta military, though formidable, found itself stretched thin, trying to defend an empire that was more than 1,000 miles wide at its peak. Yet, the Huns weren't the only storm clouds on the horizon. Internal strife was also part of the empire's undoing. The Gupta dynasty faced a series of succession disputes and power struggles, the kind that would make any modern soap opera seem tame by comparison. These internal tensions weakened the central authority, making it as wobbly as a Jenga tower, with one too many pieces pulled out. The empire's later rulers, such as Skandagupta, fought valiantly against these external and internal threats. Skandagupta himself managed to stave off Hun invasions temporarily, but the constant warfare drained the empire's resources faster than a Roman bacchanal. Economically, the empire's coffers weren't overflowing like they used to. The once-efficient taxation system began to falter under the strain of war expenses and corruption. The costs of maintaining a vast army and repairing the damages of continuous invasions started to weigh heavily on the state treasury. The gold coins that once symbolized prosperity and stability became rarer, and with that, the flicker of economic vitality dimmed. The empire's trade networks, which had been its lifeblood, also suffered disruptions. The once bustling routes were now dotted with danger, making merchants think twice before embarking on their journeys. By the mid-6th century, the Gupta Empire was a shadow of its former self. The Huns had carved out territories for themselves, like an uninvited guest who decides to move in permanently. Meanwhile, regional governors, sensing the weakening grip of central power, began to assert independence, much like ambitious teenagers testing boundaries. The political map of India started to look more like a jigsaw puzzle, with pieces that no longer fit together neatly. But before we cue the sad violins and close the curtain on the Gupta saga, let's pause to consider the empire's enduring legacy. Despite its decline, the Gupta Empire left behind a cultural and scientific treasure trove that would echo through the corridors of history. Remember Aryabhata, our math whiz with a penchant for zero. His contributions, along with those of other Gupta scholars, laid the groundwork for future mathematical and astronomical advancements. The concept of zero and the decimal system, developed during this period, would eventually travel westward, revolutionizing mathematics and playing a pivotal role in shaping the modern world. In literature, the works of Kalidasa and other poets and playwrights continue to inspire generations. Their exploration of themes like love, duty, and the human condition transcended time and geography, much like a classic novel that never goes out of style. Sanskrit, the scholarly language of choice during the Gupta era, became the vehicle through which these ideas spread, influencing cultures far beyond the Indian subcontinent. The art and architecture of the Gupta period also left an indelible mark. The intricate sculptures and temple designs set aesthetic standards that would influence Indian art for centuries. The blend of artistic beauty and spiritual symbolism found in Gupta-era artifacts became a template for future generations, serving as a reminder of the empire's sophisticated tastes and cultural priorities. So, while the political entity known as the Gupta Empire may have faded into the annals of history, its intellectual and cultural achievements ensured that it wasn't forgotten. The empire's contributions to science, literature, and art were like seeds sown in a fertile field, continuing to bear fruit long after the last emperor vacated the throne. In the grand tapestry of history, the Gupta Empire's decline serves as a poignant reminder of the impermanence of power. Even the most enlightened and prosperous societies are subject to the whims of fate, whether through internal discord or external threats. Yet, as the Gupta story shows us, the true measure of an empire's greatness lies not just in its conquests or its riches, but in the legacy it leaves behind, a legacy that continues to inspire and inform long after the dust of its downfall has settled. As we close the book on this chapter of the Gupta Empire, let's remember that history is not just a series of dates and events, but a narrative woven from the lives and legacies of those who came before us. It's a story of triumphs and trials, of brilliance and hubris, and above all, of the enduring human spirit. So here's to the Guptas, a testament to the heights of human achievement and the ever-present lessons of history. The Byzantine Empire had a flair for the dramatic, and nowhere was this more evident than in their Christmas celebrations. Picture this: Constantinople, the beating heart of an empire, draped in glimmering gold, where every nook and cranny seemed to shout, "We have more wealth than sense." Ah, but that's the Byzantines for you, masters at turning a religious festivity into a political circus. A circus where emperors didn't just juggle power, but also the occasional holy relic. Now, let's dive into the Byzantine Christmas extravaganza, shall we? Back in the day, Christmas was more than just a chance to unwrap presents or stuff yourself with turkey. It was a political event of epic proportions. Emperors would use it as a stage to project power, as if to say, "Look at my empire, it's shinier and holier than yours." And boy, did they spend big to make that point. Lavish doesn't even begin to cover the decorations. We're talking about enough gold to make Scrooge McDuck green with envy. Speaking of gold, the annual Christmas bash in Constantinople was anything but modest. To give you an idea, some historians estimate the cost of these celebrations could reach the equivalent of tens of millions of dollars in today's money. And where did all that glittering wealth go? Well, part of it went into the garish displays of opulence that decked the halls of the great palace. Think of it as the world's most expensive Christmas lights, only they didn't have electricity, so they relied on torches and candles, which added an extra layer of fire hazard to the festivities. But these grand displays weren't just for show, they were political theater at its finest. The emperor would often parade through the city, a procession that was less about spreading holiday cheer and more about reminding everyone who was in charge. Imagine Santa, but with more power and less jarliness. The emperor would be flanked by a horde of attendants and guards, all dressed to the nines in their finest silks and armor, making their way through streets lined with cheering subjects. Or at least, subjects who were paid to cheer, because nothing says Merry Christmas like a little bit of compulsory enthusiasm, right? The logistics of these events would make modern event planners break out in a cold sweat. We're talking about coordinating thousands of people, ensuring that the right nobles were seated in the right order, and making sure all the holy relics were dusted and ready for their close-up. The Byzantines had a knack for blending religion and pageantry, and Christmas was the ultimate showcase of this talent. It was a time when the spiritual and the political danced a delicate waltz, with the emperor leading both the choir and the charge. Byzantine Christmas wasn't just about the glitter and the gold. It was also a melting pot of cultural influences. The empire was a crossroads of civilizations, and this was reflected in its festivities. You'd find a curious mix of Roman traditions, Christian theology, and a dash of local flavor thrown in for good measure. It's as if the Byzantines took a look at the Roman Saturnalia, a festival known for its wild parties and role reversals, and decided to add a Christian twist just to keep things interesting. But amid all the pomp and circumstance, the holy relics were the real stars of the show. These relics were believed to hold miraculous powers, and possessing them was akin to having a direct line to the divine. It's no wonder emperors flaunted them like the ultimate Christmas gift. Forget about sarks or fruitcake. These were pieces of the true cross or bones of saints. Nothing says happy holidays like a chunk of sacred wood, right? In the Byzantine psyche, these relics were more than just objects. They were symbols of legitimacy and divine favor. Displaying them during Christmas not only reinforced the emperor's holy mandate, but also served to remind everyone that, in the cosmic hierarchy, he was just one step below the angels. Theologians and chroniclers of the time would wax poetic about these relics, attributing them with powers that would make Marvel's infinity stones look like cheap trinkets. Of course, all this opulence wasn't without its critics. Some Byzantine writers lamented the excess, pointing out that the empire might have been better off spending its wealth on, say, the army or public works rather than elaborate parties. But where's the fun in practicality? The emperors knew that a good show could distract from many of the empire's problems, at least temporarily. It was a delicate balancing act, one that would eventually topple, but while it lasted, it was one heck of a spectacle. This blend of pageantry, politics, and piety was uniquely Byzantine. It's a testament to their ability to take a religious holiday and turn it into a blockbuster event, complete with all the trimmings. And while the empire may be long gone, the stories of their extravagant Christmases remain, a reminder of a time when emperors ruled, relics reigned, and Christmas was anything but subdued. But wait, my friend, don't think the Byzantine flair for drama ended with relics and parades. Enter stage left, icons. These weren't just pretty pictures to hang on your walls. They were the heart and soul of Byzantine religious life, especially around Christmas. Imagine icons as the empire's Instagram influencers, but instead of peddling protein shakes, they offered divine intercession. Icons began as simple religious images, a way for the devout to visualize their faith. But in the Byzantine world, things rarely stayed simple for long. Just as a plain Jane can become a pop sensation overnight, these icons became rock stars of the spiritual realm. By the time Christmas rolled around, they were central to the celebrations, bridge between the earthly and the divine. The faithful would parade these icons through the streets like VIP guests, each one supposedly imbued with the power to perform miracles. But here's where the plot thickens. Not everyone was a fan of these holy images. Enter the iconoclasts, who believed all this veneration was a one-way ticket to idolatry. They were the party poopers of the time, insisting that worshipping icons was akin to worshipping the wood or canvas they were made of. And because Byzantine politics was as stable as a house of cards in a hurricane, emperors swung wildly between smashing icons and venerating them, depending on which way the political winds blew. Take Emperor Leo Roman III, for instance. He kicked off the first major iconoclastic controversy in 726, banning icons and ordering their destruction. It was like someone deciding to delete all your favorite Instagram posts without warning. Chaos ensued. Leo's son, Constantine V, continued the family tradition of icon smashing, going so far as to hold a council in 754 that denounced icons as the ultimate no-no. Yet, just a few decades later, Empress Irene flipped the script, restoring the veneration of icons in 787 during the Second Council of Nicaea. Talk about a political U-turn. So why all the flip-flopping? Partly it was a power play. When your empire is as vast and diverse as the Byzantine, you need a unifying force. Icons provided that, rallying the people around a shared belief. But the iconoclasts had a point too. When people started attributing miracles to images rather than to God, it got a little too close to paganism for comfort. In the end, it was less about theology and more about who had the upper hand politically. Now, let's talk about the economic side of this icon drama. Icons weren't just spiritual assets, they were big business. Producing icons required skilled artisans who knew their gold leaf from their gesso, and these artisans commanded a pretty penny for their work. Cities like Constantinople became hives of artistic activity, with workshops churning out icons like a Byzantine Silicon Valley. The demand was so high that it created a whole economy, employing not just artists, but also traders, suppliers, and even transporters. In today's terms, think of it as the collectible market of the medieval world. The more famous the icon, the higher its value, both spiritually and monetarily. And just like today's art market, there were fakes and forgeries, with some artisans passing off their own creations as miraculous originals. It was the ultimate blend of faith and finance, where the divine met the dollar, or the solidus, if we're being historically accurate. Yet amidst the economic boon, there was a darker side. The iconoclastic controversies led to the destruction of countless works of art, a cultural loss akin to burning libraries. It's a reminder that while the Byzantines were masters of pageantry and politics, they were also capable of monumental acts of cultural short-sightedness. And through it all, the people of the empire were caught between their devotion and the whims of their rulers, each switch in policy leaving them scrambling to adapt. As Christmas approached each year, icons took on an even more significant role. They were paraded through the streets, placed in positions of honor in churches, and used in elaborate rituals meant to invoke divine favor. For the Byzantines, Christmas was a time when the veil between heaven and earth was thin, and icons were the threads that held it all together. Yet, while icons were revered, they were also a source of tension and conflict, a testament to their power and importance. They were more than just art. They were the embodiment of faith, the linchpin of an empire, and a focal point of political intrigue. As we delve deeper into the Byzantine Empire's Christmas celebrations, remember that every icon had its own story, a tale of belief and doubt, power and politics, art and destruction. And as we continue this journey, keep in mind that the Byzantine Empire was nothing if not complex, a tapestry of contradictions woven together by the hands of history. Amidst the swirling incense and flickering candlelight of Byzantine Christmas, holy relics were the blockbuster attractions, the Marvel superheroes of the sacred world. Just as icons were the influencers, relics were the A-listers of the spiritual realm. These weren't just dusty old bones or splinters of wood. They were believed to be divine conduits, tangible links to the heavens. When an emperor processed through the streets of Constantinople with a relic held aloft, it wasn't just a piece of history on display. It was a claim to divine endorsement, a celestial thumbs-up that would make any political rival think twice before plotting a coup. Let's talk specifics. One of the most famous relics was the true cross, believed to be the very wood upon which Jesus was crucified. The Byzantines were convinced that possessing even a tiny fragment of this relic could secure them victory in battle, prosperity in harvest, and of course, the eternal gratitude of the Almighty. It's no wonder emperors treated it like the ultimate war trophy. By the 10th century, Constantinople boasted the largest collection of true cross fragments in Christendom, leading one to wonder just how big the original cross must have been, something rivaling the Eiffel Tower, perhaps. But here's where things get juicy: authenticity. In an empire where relics traded hands like baseball cards, the question of legitimacy was a constant shadow. Some relics came with impeccable credentials, while others had backstories as dubious as a Hollywood celebrity's memoir. Emperors would go to great lengths to acquire them, sometimes resorting to less than holy means. Take, for instance, the story of Emperor Baldwin Roman II, who pawned the crown of thorns to a Venetian merchant for a loan. It's hard to imagine a modern leader hawking a national treasure for cash. Yet there it was, a relic with a price tag. This brings us to the Byzantine equivalent of a relic Ponzi scheme. You see, the demand for relics was so high that a brisk trade in fakes inevitably flourished. For every genuine article, there were countless forgeries crafted by entrepreneurial monks or rogue traders. These relics were passed off as the real thing, often with elaborate stories concocted to boost their appeal. One can't help but picture a Byzantine version of the Antiques Roadshow, monks solemnly presenting a dubious relic while the appraiser nods sagely, all the while thinking, well, this is definitely not the femur of St. George. Relics were more than just holy objects. They were political tools par excellence. The emperors wielded them like spiritual scepters to assert their dominion. When Emperor Justinian I ruled in the 6th century, he amassed a staggering collection of relics, including what was purported to be the head of John the Baptist. Displaying these during Christmas wasn't just about piety. It was a strategic move to reinforce his image as God's chosen ruler. And let's be honest, when you're trying to cement your legacy, nothing screams divine mandate like a saintly skull. The economic impact of relics was monumental. They were the high-yield bonds of the medieval world, drawing pilgrims from far and wide, all eager to catch a glimpse of the sacred and contribute to the local economy. In the bustling streets of Constantinople, relics were the catalysts for commerce, driving trade and tourism. Merchants hawked wares to visiting pilgrims, and the city's coffers swelled with the influx of foreign currency. It's like the ultimate holiday shopping season, where the hot ticket item wasn't a toy but a chance to touch the divine. Yet, beneath the grandeur and the glamour, the relic trade had its dark side. Pilgrims were often exploited, charged exorbitant fees to view or venerate these sacred objects. And while some relics were kept in gilded reliquaries, others languished in obscurity, their true origins shrouded in mystery. The Byzantine penchant for pageantry often overshadowed the more humble aspects of faith, leaving one to ponder if the relics were revered for their spiritual significance or simply their ability to awe and inspire. Yet, despite the controversies, the allure of relics endured. They were symbols of hope in a world often defined by uncertainty and strife. For the Byzantine emperors, clutching a relic was akin to having a direct line to the divine, a reassuring presence in the cutthroat world of medieval politics. As Christmas rolled around each year, the faithful would flock to see these relics paraded through the streets, a spectacle that blended the sacred with the sensational. And while the Byzantine Empire eventually crumbled, its legacy of relic veneration lives on. The stories of these sacred objects and the emperors who wielded them remain a testament to a time when faith and politics were intricately intertwined, when the quest for divine favor could shape the destiny of an empire. As we continue to unravel the intricate tapestry of Byzantine Christmas, remember that each relic, whether genuine or not, had the power to shape history, leaving an indelible mark on the world that reverberates even today. Now, as we venture further into the Byzantine Christmas saga, let's shift our gaze from the glitzy halls of power to the cobblestone streets where the common folk tread. If the imperial court's Christmas was a dazzling Broadway production, then for the average Byzantine, it was more of a community theater affair, charming in its own right, but with a markedly different script. For the Byzantine elite, Christmas was a time to flaunt wealth, power, and holiness in equal measure. The Great Palace would host feasts that could rival any modern-day Michelin-starred banquet. We're talking about tables groaning under the weight of roasted boar, exotic spices, and enough honeyed pastries to put a dentist's kid through college. Imagine a medieval buffet with a touch of divine indulgence, where even the bread had a backstory steeped in sanctity. The emperor would preside over these feasts like a benevolent deity, bestowing lavish gifts upon his courtiers, jewels, land, or even a high-ranking title if the mood struck him. Meanwhile, the common folk celebrated with a bit more restraint. For them, Christmas was a time to gather with family and friends, share a modest meal, and perhaps indulge in a few homemade treats. Instead of gold-plated goblets, their cups were filled with whatever local wine the passing year had blessed them with. Yet, there was a richness in these gatherings that transcended material wealth, a sense of community and shared tradition that no imperial banquet could replicate. Let's not forget the church's role in all this. Acting as the empire's spiritual compass and PR department, the church had a knack for spinning the Christmas narrative to suit the times. It was the original master of ceremonies, organizing processions, services, and sermons designed to remind everyone of the holiday's true meaning, or at least the meaning that best served the empire's current agenda. Think of it as the ultimate spin doctor, blending theology with a touch of statecraft. The clergy, from the humble parish priest to the high-flying patriarch, were Christmas's unsung heroes, orchestrating everything from midnight masses to charitable works. And yes, they had a flair for the dramatic. Byzantine clergy knew how to work a crowd, delivering sermons that could make the most jaded soul feel a flicker of divine inspiration. Their churches were the beating heart of the community, offering solace and guidance amid the seasonal hustle and bustle. Yet, the church also had its own internal politics to contend with. Like a medieval version of a corporate office, it was rife with ambition, intrigue, and the occasional scandal. The higher up the ecclesiastical ladder you climbed, the more Byzantine, pun intended, things became. Bishops and patriarchs schemed for influence, often mirroring the imperial court's machinations. It was a delicate dance of power and piety, where the line between the sacred and the political was often blurred. Now, let's inject a bit of modern-day parallelism, shall we? Picture the Byzantine Christmas as a grand office party. The imperial court would be the executive suite, complete with designer robes and gift bags packed with relics rather than swag. The common folk played the role of diligent employees, making do with what they had and finding joy in simpler pleasures. And the church? Well, it was the human resources department, ensuring everyone played nice and remembered the reason for the season, or at least the reason that kept the empire ticking. Much like today's office parties with their unwritten rules and obligatory fun, Byzantine Christmas had its own set of social codes. The imperial court celebrations were invite-only affairs, where one misstep could land you on the fast track to exile. The common folk, on the other hand, practiced their own form of social diplomacy, navigating family dynamics and village politics with aplomb. It was a time when alliances were forged over shared meals and debts of gratitude were paid in kind words and homemade gifts. Now, here's a fun fact. The Byzantine economy during Christmas mirrored the modern holiday shopping frenzy. Just as today's retailers count on the holiday season to boost their bottom line, Byzantine merchants would eagerly anticipate the influx of pilgrims and travelers, all eager to partake in the Christmas festivities. These visitors not only filled the city's inns and taverns, but also lined the pockets of merchants selling everything from religious icons to festive delicacies. In a way, Christmas was Constantinople's Black Friday, a time when the city's bustling markets transformed into a kaleidoscope of commerce and celebration. But let's not romanticize it too much. While the streets of Constantinople thrived with activity, not everyone prospered. The city's poor, often overlooked in the grand narrative, struggled to make ends meet. While the emperor and his court feasted, many of the city's less fortunate could only hope for a warm meal or a generous benefactor. For them, Christmas was a time of mixed blessings, a season of hope and charity, but also a stark reminder of their place in the social hierarchy. Yet, amidst the disparities, there was a sense of resilience and unity. The Byzantines, regardless of their station, shared a cultural and religious heritage that bound them together during the festive season. From the grandest cathedral to the humblest hearth, the spirit of Christmas resonated throughout the empire, a flickering light in the dark of winter. As we explore these social dynamics, remember that the Byzantine Empire was a complex tapestry woven from threads of faith, power, and tradition. Each Christmas brought a new chapter in its storied history, a chance to reaffirm the bonds that held the empire together and to navigate the ever-shifting tides of politics and religion. And while we've only scratched the surface of this fascinating tale, rest assured, there's more to come as we delve even deeper into the heart of Byzantine Christmas. So stay tuned, my friend, because in this empire, the story is far from over. As the Byzantine Empire's storybook Christmas unfolded from imperial halls to cobblestone streets, one might wonder how such opulence and tradition managed to ripple through the ages. The empire may have crumbled, but its holiday legacy is surprisingly robust, like a fruitcake that just won't quit. Fast forward to our modern festivities, and you'll notice the Byzantines left behind more than just gold leaf and an affinity for sacred splinters. Take the idea of Christmas as a time for family and community gatherings. That's as Byzantine as a cup of spiced wine. Sure, we now have the benefit of not having to worry about plague or marauding invaders crashing the party, but the essence remains: togetherness, albeit with a little less incense. Speaking of incense, the Byzantine penchant for sensory overload finds its echo in today's Christmas markets, where the air is thick with cinnamon and pine. It's a far cry from the streets of Constantinople, but the principle is the same: charm the senses, distract the mind, and keep the mulled wine flowing. Even the concept of a Christmas parade can trace its roots back to those grand imperial processions, minus the holy relics, and with slightly more inflatable reindeer. Now, let's talk about icons. While we might not march through the streets with painted saints in hand, the Byzantine love for imagery has certainly left its mark. Today, we deck our halls with carefully curated holiday aesthetics, from Instagram-worthy Christmas trees to meticulously styled nativity scenes. It's the same impulse to create a visual feast, just updated for the digital age. And let's not overlook the economic engine that is Christmas. Back in Byzantine times, the holiday was a commercial bonanza, and not much has changed. Modern retailers count on the Christmas season to balance their books, just as Byzantine merchants did when the pilgrims rolled into town. The only difference is that today's consumers are more likely to be after the latest gadget than a relic. Or are they? Swap an iPhone for a piece of the true cross, and suddenly it's not so different after all. But here's where we bust some myths, because romantic as the Byzantine Empire was, it was no utopia. Those grandiose celebrations were often a facade for political maneuvering, a way for emperors to distract from less than savory realities. The glittering relics and opulent feasts masked a society rife with inequality, where the common folk could only dream of the imperial abundance they helped sustain. It's a reminder that history, like a Byzantine icon, often has layers beneath its surface. Then there's the notion that the Byzantines were the ultimate guardians of Christian orthodoxy. While they certainly played a pivotal role in shaping early Christian traditions, their version of orthodoxy was as flexible as a Byzantine politician's loyalty. The empire swung between iconoclasm and veneration, illustrating that religious fervor was often a pawn in the greater game of power. It's a lesson in how doctrines, like holiday traditions, evolve with the times, often driven by necessity rather than pure devotion. And let's not romanticize the relic trade too much. Sure, it sounds exotic. Who wouldn't want a piece of history with a side of divine favor? But beneath the allure lay a murky world of forgeries and exploitation, where the line between faith and fraud was as thin as a Byzantine gold leaf. It's an age-old tale of human nature. Where there's demand, supply will follow, even if it means stretching the truth like the shroud of Turin. So, what's the takeaway from this Byzantine Yuletide saga? Perhaps it's that history, much like Christmas itself, is a tapestry of contradictions. The Byzantines remind us that even the most sacred traditions can be tinged with human folly, that behind every grand celebration lies a complex dance of faith, power, and economics. It's a dance we still perform today, albeit to a different tune and with a few more LED lights. In the end, the story of Byzantine Christmas is a testament to humanity's enduring desire for connection, celebration, and a bit of spectacle. It's a reminder that history repeats itself, not in the grand gestures, but in the small, persistent echoes of tradition. So next time you hang that ornament or light that candle, spare a thought for the Byzantines, who, like us, sought meaning and joy in the depths of winter. Just remember to keep an eye on your relics and your credit card bill. In the grand tapestry of ancient history, the kingdom of Kush is like that hidden gem of a band you swear you discovered before they were cool. Nestled snugly along the Nile River, Kush was the epitome of geographical jackpot. Think prime real estate before it was a thing. From around 1070 BCE to 350 CE, this African empire wasn't just loitering in the shadows of Egypt. No, it was more like a feisty startup, sometimes even playing the role of Egypt's not-so-junior partner, or perhaps its cheeky intern with big ambitions. First things first, let's talk location. Kush was parked in what we today call Sudan, and its position was as strategic as it gets. The Nile was the ancient equivalent of a multi-lane superhighway, providing Kush with a front-row seat to trade routes that stretched from the depths of Africa to the Mediterranean's bustling shores. Real estate moguls of the ancient world would have drooled over this kind of access. It was like having beachfront property with a daily parade of merchants, traders, and the occasional conqueror passing by. Now, if you're thinking Kush was just some dusty backwater with a fancy address, think again. The kingdom began its rise in the aftermath of the New Kingdom period of Egypt, around 1070 BCE. Picture this. Egypt was going through a bit of a midlife crisis, its power waning like an overhyped celebrity. Kush, seizing the moment, started to flex its own muscles, gradually transforming from an Egyptian vassal to a power player in its own right. Imagine a scrappy startup learning all the tricks of the trade from its mentor, only to one day challenge it head-on. That's Kush for you. Speaking of mentors, Egypt was the big sibling Kush looked up to and occasionally tussled with. The two had a complicated relationship, like frenemies who can't decide if they're allies or rivals. For much of its early history, Kush absorbed a lot from Egypt: language, culture, religious practices. But make no mistake, Kush had its own flair and wasn't just a carbon copy. While Egypt was busy building pyramids that would make even the most extravagant modern skyscrapers blush, Kush was perfecting its own version. Yes, they built pyramids too, albeit smaller and steeper, as if to say, we see your pyramids, Egypt, and we raise you something uniquely Kushite. Kush's rise wasn't just about geographical luck or mimicking its neighbors. This was an empire with serious economic chops. Its wealth came from gold mines that were the stuff of ancient legend. We're talking about fields of gold so rich, they made Midas look like a penny pincher. Not only did Kush control gold, but it also had a monopoly on some of the most sought-after luxury goods of the time: ivory, ebony, and incense. These were the must-haves for any self-respecting ancient VIP, and Kush was the go-to supplier. But let's not romanticize it entirely. For all its wealth and influence, Kush was a land of stark realities and harsh challenges. The kingdom had to contend with a landscape that was as unforgiving as it was bountiful. The Nile brought life, but it also brought floods that could be as destructive as they were nurturing. Then there were the desert sands, creeping ever closer like a relentless army. Maintaining a kingdom in such a setting was no small feat. It required innovation, resilience, and a dash of audacity. Politically, Kush was no pushover. This was a kingdom with its own line of kings and queens who were as formidable as any pharaoh. The Kushite rulers were known as the Kandaks, or Candaces, powerful women who often took the reins of power, a fact that should give pause to anyone who thinks ancient history was all about men with crowns. These leaders didn't just sit on their thrones looking majestic. They led armies, conducted diplomacy, and made decisions that shaped the destiny of their empire. One of the most intriguing aspects of Kush is its eventual reversal of roles with Egypt. There was a time when the Kushite kings didn't just want to be like Egypt, they wanted to be Egypt. In the 8th century BCE, they didn't just crash Egypt's party, they took over the whole venue. The 25th dynasty of Egypt was, in fact, a Kushite dynasty. The kings of Kush ruled Egypt for almost a century, with rulers like Pi and Taharqa etching their names into the annals of history. It's like if your scrappy startup not only surpassed its mentor, but bought out the whole company and started calling the shots. This period of Kushite rule in Egypt is a testament to the empire's power and ambition. It wasn't just a matter of military might, although they certainly had that. It was about vision, a vision of a unified Nile Valley under the rule of the Kushite kings. They saw themselves as restorers of the ancient way, bringing back the glory days of Egypt's past with a Kushite twist. The pharaohs of the 25th dynasty were not just rulers, they were cultural icons, patronizing arts and architecture that left a lasting legacy. However, as with all great empires, Kush's story is also one of decline. By around 350 CE, the kingdom had faded into history, a victim of changing trade routes, internal strife, and external pressures, like the rise of the powerful Aksumite Empire. But even in its decline, Kush left an indelible mark on the annals of history, a testament to its enduring legacy and the cyclical nature of power. In the grand narrative of history, the kingdom of Kush stands as a reminder that Africa was not just a passive backdrop to ancient civilization, but a dynamic, influential player in its own right. It was a kingdom of innovation, resilience, and ambition, a place where the sands of the Sahara whispered tales of glory and intrigue. And while it may be one of history's best-kept secrets, Kush's story is one that deserves to be told, complete with all its complexities and contradictions. So, as you drift off to sleep, let the echoes of Kush's mighty past lull you into dreams of ancient power and forgotten empires. As you settle into the stories of ancient power and intrigue, let's turn the spotlight on what made Kush not just a kingdom, but a veritable economic powerhouse. Picture this. Kush was to ancient trade what Silicon Valley is to modern tech, an absolute titan. If you think of the Nile as the expressway of the ancient world, Kush was the toll booth collecting all the gold, iron, and luxury items passing through. But unlike today's digital transactions, their wealth was all about the tangible, not the virtual. First off, gold. Oh, the allure of gold. It was as irresistible then as it is now, and Kush had it in spades. The land of Kush was practically sitting on a golden throne, with mines that were the envy of the ancient world. These mines, located primarily in the eastern desert, were said to be so bountiful that they made King Solomon's mines look like a piggy bank. Gold wasn't just a shiny metal. It was the ancient equivalent of a credit card with no limit, accepted everywhere from the markets of Thebes to the palaces of Babylon. Kush's gold was a crucial component in its trade relations, and it wasn't just the metal itself that was valuable, but what it represented: wealth, power, and prestige. Now, let's talk about iron, less flashy than gold, but no less significant. Kush was one of the earliest African centers for iron production, a fact that might surprise those who assume Africa was always a technological backwater. By around 500 BCE, the kingdom was already smelting iron in industrial quantities. This wasn't just a hobby for them, it was serious business. Iron was the material of choice for tools and weapons, basically the iPhones of the ancient world. The ironworking skills of Kush made its armies formidable and its tools invaluable for agriculture, which in turn supported a thriving population. The iron trade routes stretched far and wide, linking Kush with regions as distant as the Red Sea and beyond. Talk about having a heavy metal fan base. But Kush's economic prowess wasn't all about hard metals. Oh no, they were also the purveyors of ancient bling, luxury goods like incense, ivory, and ebony. These were the must-have items for any self-respecting ancient aristocrat. Incense, for instance, was not just about smelling good. It was integral to religious and cultural practices. The aroma of frankincense wafting through a temple wasn't just pleasing to the senses. It was a direct line to the divine, or so they believed. Kush controlled the trade in these aromatic treasures, and it was a monopoly that would make even modern tech giants green with envy. Speaking of which, you might wonder how the Kushites advertised these luxury goods. Forget slick marketing campaigns or Instagram influencers. They had trade caravans and Nile boats as their billboards. Merchants were the original brand ambassadors, spreading the word about Kushite goods far and wide. Imagine a caravan leader boasting about the latest shipment of ivory. Have you seen the new tusks from Kush? They're all the rage in Phoenicia. It's a bit like ancient word-of-mouth marketing, only with more camels and fewer hashtags. Now, let's stir some numbers into this economic stew. At its peak, the trade routes of Kush extended over 1,000 miles, from the deserts of Sudan to the shores of the Mediterranean. The kingdom's strategic location meant it was the middleman in a vast network of trade that connected Africa with Europe and Asia. Goods flowed like water, and so did wealth. The sheer volume of trade passing through Kush translated into an economic influence that was nothing short of impressive. In today's terms, we're talking about GDP figures that would make a small nation blush. But the economic story of Kush isn't all about glitter and gold. The kingdom faced its fair share of challenges, not least of which was the fickle nature of ancient trade routes. A single shift in political alliances or the rise of a new power could reroute the flow of goods and leave Kush high and dry. The emergence of the Aksumite Empire to the east was a particularly sharp thorn in Kush's side, as it began to dominate trade routes that had long been Kush's domain. It's a bit like watching your favorite local cafe get overshadowed by a big chain. Heartbreaking, but part of the economic game. Moreover, Kush's economy was also deeply entwined with its political structure. The kingdom's rulers were not just figureheads, they were the CEOs of this ancient corporation. The Kandakes or Candaces, those formidable queens we mentioned earlier, were not only leading armies, but also managing trade policies and economic strategies. Their political acumen was crucial in maintaining Kush's status as a trade hub. Imagine a queen negotiating trade deals with a neighboring state, ensuring that Kush's goods continued to flow smoothly. These were rulers who knew that power wasn't just about military strength, it was also about economic influence. And let's not forget the social aspect of all this economic activity. The wealth from trade supported a vibrant society with a rich culture that was a blend of African, Egyptian, and other influences. Kush was a melting pot long before the term was coined. The prosperity from trade allowed for advancements in the arts, architecture, and religion, creating a civilization that was as culturally rich as it was economically savvy. Yet, despite all this prosperity, the reality of Kush was not always as grand as it seemed. The kingdom had to contend with the harshness of the desert environment and the unpredictability of the Nile floods. These natural challenges required constant innovation and adaptation. The Kushites were nothing if not resilient, but it was a delicate balancing act to maintain their prosperity in the face of such adversity. So, as we wrap up this leg of our journey through the economic landscape of Kush, let's remember that this was a kingdom that thrived on the intersection of geography, resources, and ingenuity. It was a place where the practicalities of trade met the aspirations of an ambitious people. And while the sands of time may have buried much of its physical legacy, the economic footprints of Kush are etched deep into the annals of history, waiting to be uncovered by those who dare to look beyond the pyramids and into the heart of one of Africa's greatest empires. And on that note, stay tuned as we continue to unravel the next chapter of Kush's fascinating saga. And speaking of fascinating sagas, let's dive into the political landscape of Kush, where the real power brokers weren't the kings but the queens, known as Kandaks. Now, these weren't your run-of-the-mill monarchs who merely waved from balconies and cut ribbons at temple openings. No, the Kandaks were the political equivalent of rock stars, commanding armies and orchestrating alliances with the finesse of a maestro. Let's start with one of the most famous Kandaks, Ammonianas, who ruled around 40 BCE to 10 BCE. Her name might not ring a bell like Cleopatra's, but trust me, she was every bit as formidable. Picture this. Ammonianas took on the Roman Empire, led by none other than Emperor Augustus. The Romans had this little habit of expanding their borders like a college kid at an all-you-can-eat buffet. When they tried to annex Kush, Ammonianas wasn't having it. She launched a campaign that would make any seasoned general nod in approval, even managing to capture a few Roman settlements. And here's a juicy tidbit. She sent a bronze head of Augustus, which her troops had decapitated from a statue, back to Kush. Talk about sending a message. Now, pause for a second and consider the sheer audacity here. This wasn't just some skirmish in the desert. This was a calculated move against one of history's most powerful empires. Ammonianas didn't just have military chops. She had political acumen that would make Machiavelli blush. The Romans, perhaps realizing they'd bitten off more than they could chew, eventually brokered a peace treaty. Ammonianas secured terms that allowed Kush to remain largely autonomous, a testament to her diplomatic savvy. But while we're busy applauding the Kandaks, it's worth noting that not all stories of female power in Kush are wrapped in romantic legends. The reality was often more gritty than glamorous. Ruling over a kingdom like Kush wasn't just about donning crowns and throwing lavish parties. It involved navigating a minefield of political alliances, tribal tensions, and external threats. These queens often had to play hardball. Think Game of Thrones, but without the dragons. The Kandaks were realists at heart, wielding power with a keen sense of survival. And speaking of survival, let's talk about the myth surrounding the Kandaks' supposed supernatural powers. Legends say they could control the weather or see the future. Now, while it's tempting to imagine Ammonianas summoning a sandstorm to thwart the Romans, the truth is likely less magical, but equally impressive. The Kandaks' real power lay in their strategic minds and their ability to inspire loyalty among their people and troops. They were adept at reading political tides and using them to their advantage, a skill far more useful than any supposed mystical ability. For instance, consider the role of Queen Shanakdakhet, who ruled in the 2nd century BCE. She was one of the first Kandaks to appear on monuments without a king, underscoring her status as a ruler in her own right. Her reign was marked by significant architectural and cultural achievements, with temples and pyramids reflecting both her power and her vision. Shanakdakhet's rule was a period of consolidation and cultural flourishing, a testament to her effective governance. The Kandaks also had to be masters of public relations. They knew the importance of image and symbolism in maintaining power. Statues and inscriptions often depicted them as warrior queens, lionesses of the savannah who could both nurture and destroy. These images weren't just for show. They were tools of statecraft designed to convey strength and legitimacy. Now, fast forward to today's political scene, and you might draw parallels with modern women leaders who must navigate similar challenges, albeit in a different context. Kandak's ability to leverage both soft and hard power is a lesson in leadership that still resonates. They had to be shrewd negotiators, charismatic leaders, and occasionally ruthless executors of power. Each move was calculated, each alliance carefully crafted to ensure the survival and prosperity of their kingdom. The political structure of Kush also provides a fascinating study in gender dynamics. While many ancient societies relegated women to the background, Kush placed them at the forefront. This wasn't some proto-feminist utopia, but a pragmatic adaptation to the realities of leadership. The Kandaks were often the linchpins of the kingdom, their leadership providing stability in times of turmoil. And let's not overlook the economic aspect of these power dynamics. The Kandaks were as much CEOs as they were monarchs, overseeing the vast trade networks that enriched Kush. Their ability to maintain economic prosperity was crucial to their political legitimacy. They understood that wealth wasn't just about gold and ivory. It was about influence and control over critical trade routes. Yet, for all their power, the Kandaks were not infallible. They faced the same pitfalls that have tripped up many a ruler: succession disputes, internal rebellions, and the ever-present threat of external invasion. The political landscape of Kush was as treacherous as the sands of the Sahara, and navigating it required a delicate balance of strength and diplomacy. So, as we debunk the myths and strip away the romantic legends, what we find is a story of realpolitik, a tale of women who wielded power with a deftness that would make even the most seasoned political veterans take note. The Kandaks were not just symbols of female empowerment. They were astute leaders who understood the complexities of ruling an empire. In the grand tapestry of history, they stand out as beacons of what leadership can achieve when it blends ambition with acumen. As we leave the political intrigues of the Kandaks behind, remember that the story of Kush doesn't end here. The kingdom's legacy is a testament to the strength and resilience of its rulers, a narrative that continues to unfold with each new archaeological discovery. So stay tuned as we peel back more layers of this ancient empire, revealing the secrets that lie beneath the desert sands. While the Kandaks were busy rewriting the rulebook on ancient leadership, Kush was also leaving its mark on the cultural canvas of history. Let's dig into the cultural achievements of this African powerhouse, with a side of myth-busting and a dash of reality check for good measure. Picture the scene. You're trekking through the sands of Nubia, and suddenly, like a mirage that's actually real, a pyramid appears on the horizon. But wait, this isn't the Great Pyramid of Giza, towering like a skyscraper of stone. No, this is a Kushite pyramid, and it's got its own unique vibe, steeper angles and a smaller footprint, but don't let its size fool you. These pyramids pack a punch in terms of cultural significance and architectural flair. Now, myth-busting time. It's often claimed that Kush built more pyramids than Egypt. And, believe it or not, that's true. There are over 200 pyramids scattered across 3 major sites, El Kuru, Nuri, and Meroe. But before you get swept away by visions of a pyramid-building frenzy, let's add a pinch of reality. These structures, while numerous, were not the colossal feats of engineering that their Egyptian cousins were. They were more like the compact SUVs of the pyramid world, efficient and purposeful, if not quite the luxury models. So why the smaller scale? Well, it comes down to the nuts and bolts of labor and resources. Building a pyramid, even a pint-sized one, was no walk in the park. It took a small army of workers, resources, and a whole lot of logistical planning. Kush wasn't endowed with the same riverine wealth as the Giza Plateau. Thus, their pyramids reflect a savvy adaptation to their environment. Think of it as ancient architecture going green, maximum impact with minimal resources. But it's not just about the pyramids. The architecture of Kush was a testament to their cultural ingenuity. The city of Meroe, for example, was a bustling metropolis, complete with temples, palaces, and even a royal bath complex that would make any Roman emperor raise an eyebrow. The great enclosure at Muswar Sufra is another case in point, a sprawling complex that defies easy categorization, part temple, part ceremonial hub, part who knows what. Its labyrinthine layout and grand scale hint at a vibrant ceremonial life and a deep connection to Kushite spirituality and governance. On the topic of spirituality, the Kushites had a pantheon of gods that blended Egyptian influences with their own indigenous beliefs. Amun, the head honcho of the Egyptian gods, was a big deal in Kush too, with the temple at Napata being a major religious center. But unlike the Egyptian version, the Kushite Amun was depicted with ram's horns, a distinctive twist that signaled their unique interpretation. This blend of influences created a rich tapestry of religious life, where Egyptian deities rubbed shoulders with local gods in a cosmopolitan divine assembly. And let's not forget the writing system. The Meroitic script, one of the oldest known written languages in Africa, is a tantalizing puzzle for historians. Comprised of 2 alpha-syllabaries, it's a script that we can read but not fully comprehend. Imagine having a book and being able to pronounce the words but not grasping the meaning. Frustrating, right? Yet this script is a testament to Kush's intellectual achievements, a society that valued record-keeping and communication in its own tongue, even if the Rosetta Stone isn't around to help us crack the code. But what about art? The art of Kush. It was as vibrant as the land itself, with murals and carvings that showcased a society steeped in symbolism and beauty. The art often depicted scenes of daily life, religious rites, and royal ceremonies, all painted with an attention to detail that speaks to a society that appreciated the finer things. The colors might have faded with time, but the artistic flair of Kush remains undeniable. Now, we can't talk about Kush without addressing the romanticized narrative that often surrounds ancient empires. Sure, it's tempting to imagine Kush as a utopia of cultural harmony and architectural marvels, but the truth is more nuanced. Behind the grandeur was a society that, like any other, grappled with the gritty realities of life. Construction projects were labor-intensive, requiring a workforce that was not always made up of willing participants. The pyramids, temples, and sculptures we admire today were built on the backs of skilled laborers who toiled under the harsh Nubian sun, often with little recognition. And while we're on the topic of recognition, let's spare a thought for the unsung heroes of Kushite culture, the artisans, scribes, and builders whose names have been lost to history. These were the people who turned visions into reality, who carved the stone, penned the scrolls, and painted the walls. They were the lifeblood of Kushite culture, their creativity fueling the kingdom's lasting legacy. As we traverse the dusty corridors of Kush's cultural legacy, it's clear that this was an empire of contrasts, a place where grandeur met pragmatism, where sacred spaces coexisted with royal power, and where the past was always a guiding force for the future. So, as we leave the echoes of Kush's artistic achievements behind, remember that the story isn't over yet. There are more layers to peel back, more secrets to uncover, and more myths to bust. Stay tuned as we continue our journey through the sands of time, delving ever deeper into the enigma that is the kingdom of Kush. As we delve into the final act of Kush's saga, it's time to turn the spotlight on the fall of this once mighty kingdom. Picture Kush not as a tragic hero in its death throes, but as an empire that slowly bowed out of the historical stage. It didn't crash and burn. It quietly packed its bags and left the party, leaving behind a legacy that's as enigmatic as ever. So, what led to the decline of this African powerhouse? Well, a perfect storm of external pressures and internal squabbles did the trick, like a bad game of Jenga where everyone's pulling the wrong blocks. First up, the external threats. By around 350 CE, the Aksumite Empire was the new kid on the block, flexing its muscles and reconfiguring trade routes that had once been Kush's bread and butter. Imagine Kush as the beloved local diner, suddenly overshadowed by a flashy new franchise that's drawing all the customers away. Aksum began dominating the trade that had flowed through Kush for centuries, and with it, the lifeblood of Kush's economy began to drain away. Now, internal struggles were no less significant. Kush had its fair share of political infighting and succession disputes. Think of it as a medieval soap opera, minus the dragons, but with plenty of intrigue. The once stable line of Kandaks and kings began to fracture, with each faction vying for control like kids squabbling over a coveted toy. This internal disunity made it difficult for Kush to respond effectively to external threats, a fatal flaw that history has seen time and again. Economically, the shifting sands of trade were like a death knell. The kingdom's gold mines remained, but the market dynamics had changed. With Aksum controlling the Red Sea routes, Kush's access to key trading partners dwindled. The once bustling caravans that had crisscrossed the deserts became less frequent, and the economic engine that powered Kush began to sputter and stall. It's a bit like owning a fleet of VCRs in the age of streaming. Suddenly, your once valuable assets are just relics of a bygone era. Politically, Kush was caught in a catch-22. To survive, it needed unity and strong leadership, but the very act of unifying under a single leader was fraught with peril. Factions and power struggles made consensus elusive. Without a clear vision or direction, the kingdom drifted, a ship without a captain. It's a stark reminder that even the mightiest empires can crumble from within when leadership falters. Now, here's where the tale takes a twist worthy of any dramatic epic. While Kush was fading, its northern neighbor, Egypt, continued to bask in the glow of its monumental history. The pyramids of Giza, the temples of Luxor, and the enigmatic Sphinx, these icons of ancient Egypt were hard to compete with. They cast long shadows across history, often obscuring the achievements of their southern counterparts. It's like being in a band with a superstar lead singer. No matter how well you play, the spotlight rarely shifts from the star. But here's the thing. Kush's legacy shouldn't be measured solely by its monuments or its might. Instead, it's the cultural and political influence that rippled outwards, shaping the world in ways both seen and unseen. The Kushite period of rule in Egypt left an indelible mark, a testament to the fluidity of power dynamics in the ancient world. The echoes of Kushite innovation in metallurgy, architecture, and governance resonate through history, even if they're not always recognized. History, with its penchant for grand narratives and larger-than-life characters, often forgets the quieter stories. The tale of Kush is one such story, a narrative of resilience, adaptation, and ambition, even in decline. It's a reminder that not all legacies are etched in stone. Some are woven into the very fabric of cultural evolution. As we wrap up our journey through the annals of Kush, let's reflect on how history remembers, or forgets, great civilizations. Kush may not have the instant name recognition of Egypt, but its story is a crucial chapter in the tale of human endeavor. It's a testament to the fact that greatness is often more about influence and legacy than mere survival. So, as you tuck this newfound knowledge into the recesses of your mind, remember that the kingdom of Kush, with all its complexities and contradictions, is a reminder that history is as much about what's forgotten as what's remembered. And with that, we close the book on Kush, leaving its echoes to whisper through the sands of time. In the bustling markets of 10th century Bukhara, where merchants peddled everything from spices to silk under a cacophony of bartering voices, a young boy named Avicenna, known formally as Ibn Sina, was about to become the Justin Bieber of medieval medicine. Sure, today Bukhara might be a serene spot on your Silk Road tour itinerary, but back then it was a multicultural hub where the air was thick with the scent of opportunity, and probably a fair amount of camel dung. This was the backdrop of Avicenna's early years, where the cacophony of cultures and ideas served as the perfect petri dish for his burgeoning intellect. Born in 980 CE, Avicenna was the kind of kid who probably made his peers look like they were still figuring out which end of the quill to write with. By age 10, he'd already memorized the entire Quran. That's right, the whole thing. Imagine your average fifth grader today accomplishing that and still having time to binge their favorite Netflix series. But Avicenna wasn't satisfied with just religious texts. No, his intellectual appetite was as insatiable as a teenager's craving for pizza rolls. He delved into philosophy, mathematics, and most notably medicine. Now, let's talk about medicine in Avicenna's time. If you think our current healthcare system has its quirks, 10th century medical practices would make you break out in a cold sweat. The prevailing wisdom involved a lot of questionable practices. Leeches, anyone. So, picture young Avicenna, a prodigy in a world where the cure for a headache might involve a concoction of herbs blended with a side helping of astrology. The kid was bound to ask some questions. In the socio-political landscape of his day, Avicenna's homeland was a bit of a geopolitical puzzle. Bukhara was part of the Samanid Empire, a realm that was to the Persian Renaissance what Silicon Valley is to tech startups. The Samanid rulers adored culture and knowledge like hipsters love artisan coffee, and they were more than happy to patronize scholars and scientists. This was crucial for Avicenna because it meant he could access a treasure trove of literature and knowledge, assuming he could elbow his way past the crowd of other eager minds. By the time Avicenna was a teenager, he was already making a name for himself as a medical wonderkind. At 16, when most of us were probably still grappling with acne, he was treating patients with ailments that would make a modern ER doctor flinch. His reputation grew so much that he was called upon to treat the Samanid prince. Talk about pressure. But Avicenna, with his unflappable confidence, not only cured the prince, but also gained unfettered access to the royal library as a reward. This was the equivalent of being handed the keys to the Harvard Medical Library, only with fewer pretentious Latin inscriptions. Avicenna's early medical practices were a fascinating fusion of empirical observation and the not-so-empirical wisdom of the day. He was like a medieval Sherlock Holmes, deducing ailments with a keen eye and a sharp mind. Yet, his success also lay in his ability to question the status quo. Where others saw mystical humors and superstitions, he saw the potential for a more systematic approach to medicine. Sure, he still used some of the era's standard practices, but he also pushed the boundaries by introducing his own insights, probably much to the chagrin of traditionalists who clung to their leech jars like they were sacred relics. The socio-political climate was as volatile as a spiced ale, with the Samanid Empire eventually giving way to the Ghaznavids. But Avicenna, ever the intellectual nomad, adapted, moving from court to court like an academic rock star on tour. This mobility allowed him to gather a wealth of knowledge and experiences, further fueling his insatiable curiosity and innovative medical practices. Yet, what really set Avicenna apart was his ability to blend the philosophical with the practical. His canon of medicine, which he began formulating during these formative years, would go on to influence both Islamic and European medicine for centuries. But more on that in later episodes. For now, let's just appreciate the irony of a boy who, in an era where medical knowledge was as murky as a medieval broth, managed to not only navigate, but also revolutionize the field before he was old enough to legally rent a camel on his own. Avicenna's story is one of intellect triumphing over the constraints of his environment. He questioned what others accepted, and this attitude allowed him to not just practice medicine, but to redefine it. His early years, filled with curiosity and an unyielding quest for knowledge, set the stage for a legacy that would echo through the ages. And while myths about his miraculous cures and supernatural intellect abound, the reality is even more impressive. A young boy in a turbulent time, driven by nothing more than an unquenchable thirst for understanding. While Avicenna's early years were like a fireworks show of intellect and ambition, his career as a court physician was more of a high-stakes game of chess played on a board where the pieces were as likely to stab you in the back as to make a legal move. Welcome to the world of medieval court politics, where the phrase, "keep your friends close and your enemies closer," might as well have been embroidered on the royal drapes. Avicenna mastered this treacherous terrain with the nimbleness of a cat on a hot tin roof, treating rulers who were as much interested in his medical prowess as they were in his ability to navigate the labyrinthine corridors of palace intrigue. After the Samanid Empire's curtain call, Avicenna found himself in the crosshairs of the Ghaznavid dynasty. Yet, he didn't just survive the transition, he thrived. Picture him as an academic rock star, moving from one princely court to another, each time bringing with him a suitcase full of books and a head full of ideas. If there was a frequent flyer program for medieval scholars, Avicenna would have had enough miles to circumnavigate the globe, twice. His travels took him to places like Ray, Hamadan, and Isfahan, each journey a new chapter in his unfolding saga of medical innovation and philosophical inquiry. Now, let's talk about his magnum opus, the Canon of Medicine, published around 1025. Think of it as the Gray's Anatomy of the medieval world, minus the melodrama and love triangles. This was a 5-volume encyclopedia that laid down the foundations for modern medicine. It tackled everything from the basics of medical theory to complex surgical procedures, all interpolated with Avicenna's own groundbreaking insights. The Canon wasn't just a book. It was more like a medical constitution, cited by generations of physicians across both the Islamic world and medieval Europe. And let's not forget the economic context. Books back then weren't exactly cheap. The production of a single manuscript could cost as much as a modest house, assuming you had the parchment, the ink, and a scribe who wouldn't fall asleep mid-sentence. Yet, the Canon of Medicine was so influential that it was translated into Latin by the 12th century and became a staple in European universities for the next 500 years. Talk about getting your money's worth. Avicenna's interactions with rulers were like a medieval sitcom, full of witty repartee and the occasional life-or-death situation. He once served as a physician for the Ba'id Amir Shams al-Dawla in Hamadan, a ruler who was reportedly as volatile as a cauldron of boiling oil. Avicenna cured him of colic, a condition that was not just painful but downright debilitating. Imagine trying to run an empire while doubled over in agony. Not exactly the picture of regal authority. The Amir was so grateful that he appointed Avicenna as his chief minister, because why not? Who better to handle state affairs than the guy who just saved your intestines? However, palace life wasn't all sunshine and surgical success. Avicenna's political involvement landed him in hot water more than once. He was jailed by that very same Amir. Yes, the one he cured, over suspicions of conspiracy. Medieval rulers were a paranoid bunch, always on the lookout for the next coup, which meant Avicenna had to be as adept at dodging political daggers as he was at diagnosing ailments. Yet, these tumultuous experiences only expanded his horizon. During his imprisonments, Avicenna continued to write, churning out philosophical treatises that would later influence not just medicine, but fields like metaphysics and psychology. It's as if being locked up was merely an inconvenience to his prolific output, akin to a modern author dealing with a bad Wi-Fi connection. The political landscape of the time was a patchwork quilt of shifting alliances and power struggles. The Buyids, Seljuks, and Ghaznavids were like rival bands at a music festival, each trying to outdo the other while constantly stealing each other's drummers. This chaotic environment was both a curse and a blessing for Avicenna. While it meant instability and danger, it also provided a plethora of patrons eager to flaunt their cultured status by sponsoring the great minds of the day. Avicenna was no stranger to this, using his skills and reputation to secure positions that allowed him to continue his scholarly pursuits. And yet, through all the courtly drama and political maneuvering, Avicenna managed to maintain a sense of humor. It's said, though perhaps apocryphally, that when asked about his ability to predict the future, he quipped that he could predict everything except his own fee. A sly nod to the precarious nature of his work, where his worth was often determined by the whims of those in power. In the end, Avicenna's life was a testament to the idea that knowledge is power, but wisdom is knowing how to wield it. He was a man who not only understood the world around him, but also had the savvy to navigate it. As he moved from court to court, Avicenna left behind a legacy that transcended borders and outlasted empires. His canon of medicine would continue to be a touchstone for centuries, influencing the likes of Thomas Aquinas and paving the way for the Renaissance. Yet, let's not get too carried away on a cloud of romanticism. While Avicenna's achievements were indeed monumental, they were built on a foundation of relentless study and a knack for survival in a world that was as unforgiving as it was fascinating. He was a man who lived in an age where the line between life and death was as thin as a parchment page, yet he not only walked it, but redefined it. As we continue to explore Avicenna's life, remember that while the legends are captivating, the reality is far richer. His story is one of intellect overcoming adversity, of art and science blending into a tapestry of human achievement. And while Avicenna himself might have chuckled at the myths that sprung up around him, he would likely appreciate the lasting impact of his work, a testament to the enduring power of curiosity and the human spirit. In the grand tapestry of Avicenna's life, the philosophical threads are just as vibrant as his medical exploits, if not more so. Our man Avicenna wasn't just stitching up wounds and navigating the treacherous waters of medieval politics. He was also diving deep into the ocean of metaphysics, asking questions that would make even Socrates sit up and take notice. His philosophical works, while not as flashy as curing a prince's colic, have left an indelible mark on the world of ideas. Welcome to the cerebral side of Avicenna, where medicine meets metaphysics and logic gets a front-row seat. Let's start with Avicenna's floating man thought experiment. Picture this. You're suspended in a void, devoid of sensory input. No sight, no sound, no touch. Just you and your thoughts, floating in existential limbo. The scenario might sound like a rejected Black Mirror episode, but it was Avicenna's way of pondering self-awareness. His hypothesis: even without sensory experience, you would still have a consciousness of your existence. This wasn't just philosophical navel-gazing. It was Avicenna's way of exploring the nature of the soul and consciousness, centuries before Descartes decided to quip, "I think, therefore I am." Now, why does this matter? Because Avicenna was challenging the very framework of existence. At a time when many were content to attribute everything to divine will or cosmic mystery, Avicenna was poking and prodding at the fabric of reality itself. His thought experiment wasn't just an intellectual exercise. It was a bold statement about the power of human reason and the autonomy of the mind. In today's terms, it's like dropping a philosophical bombshell and watching the ripples spread throughout the intellectual community. But Avicenna didn't stop there. He took his metaphysical musings and wove them into his medical practice. For him, understanding the mind was as crucial as understanding the body. It was all part of his holistic approach to health, which acknowledged that a healthy mind was integral to a healthy body. something our modern wellness gurus would nod sagely at, perhaps while clutching their green smoothies. Avicenna's contributions to logic and science were equally groundbreaking. He was a master of Aristotelian logic, yet he wasn't content to merely regurgitate Aristotle's teachings. Instead, he expanded upon them, creating a system that would influence thinkers for centuries. His work in this area was akin to a software update for the human mind, taking the best of what came before and adding new features for enhanced functionality. In terms of logic, Avicenna introduced the concept of modal logic, which dealt with possibility and necessity. He wasn't just interested in what was, he wanted to understand what could be. This was revolutionary, like adding a third dimension to a two-dimensional map. It allowed for a richer, more nuanced understanding of reality, one that would eventually inform everything from mathematics to computer science. And talk about foresight. His ideas on the soul and consciousness have echoes in today's discussions on artificial intelligence and the nature of self-awareness. Imagine Avicenna scrolling through social media, chuckling at debates about AI ethics and machine consciousness. He'd probably raise an eyebrow and say, "Been there, done that." Back in the 11th century, economically speaking, Avicenna's philosophical works were like intellectual currency. His ideas were bartered and traded across continents, influencing scholars in the Islamic world and beyond. The fact that his work was translated into Latin and spread throughout medieval Europe speaks volumes about its value. It was intellectual gold, mined from the depths of Avicenna's mind and refined into a treasure trove of wisdom. But let's not romanticize too much. Avicenna's philosophy wasn't just the product of a leisurely stroll through the gardens of thought. It was forged in the crucible of a world rife with uncertainty and upheaval. His ability to question and innovate was born out of necessity, a survival mechanism in a time when questioning the status quo could be as dangerous as an untreated infection. Yet he persisted, driven by an insatiable curiosity and a belief in the power of reason. So, what did Avicenna's philosophical forays mean for the world at large? Well, they laid the groundwork for future intellectual revolutions, influencing everyone from Thomas Aquinas to René Descartes. His blending of medicine and metaphysics was a precursor to the kind of interdisciplinary thinking that drives innovation today. Think of him as the original Renaissance man, centuries before the Renaissance was even a glint in Italy's eye. But here's the twist. While Avicenna's ideas were groundbreaking, they also highlighted the limitations of his time. His musings on consciousness and existence were in many ways ahead of their time, but they were also constrained by the scientific tools and knowledge available to him. It's a bit like trying to play a symphony on a kazoo, remarkable for what's achieved, but limited by the medium. And yet, isn't that the hallmark of a true visionary? Avicenna pushed the boundaries of what was possible, even as he worked within the confines of his era. His legacy is a testament to the power of human ingenuity and the enduring quest for knowledge. His story reminds us that while the world may change, the fundamental questions about existence, consciousness, and the human condition remain as relevant as ever. As we delve deeper into Avicenna's life, remember that his philosophical contributions are not just historical footnotes, but are vibrant threads in the ongoing tapestry of human thought. His ideas resonate with our modern existential musings, proving that while the world has evolved, the quest for understanding remains timeless. Stay tuned as we explore how Avicenna's intellectual legacy continues to echo through the ages, shaping and reshaping the landscape of human knowledge. Avicenna's legacy is like a vintage wine, aged over centuries, with a complex bouquet of myths and realities that can intoxicate even the most sober historian. But before we get too tipsy on romanticized tales, let's pour a glass of reality and sip on the facts. Avicenna, or as his close friends probably called him, the genius next door, left behind more than just a few dusty tomes. His influence stretched from the sun-scorched sands of Persia to the candle-lit classrooms of medieval Europe, and it still echoes in today's pop culture. But how much of his story is fact, and how much is just an elaborate PR campaign from the Middle Ages? Starting with the basics, Avicenna's Canon of Medicine wasn't merely a bestseller. It was the Harry Potter of medical texts, captivating audiences across continents. By the 12th century, it had been translated into Latin, making its way into European universities and staying in the curriculum for a solid 5 centuries. That's a longer run than most Broadway shows. This wasn't just because it was filled with groundbreaking medical insights. It was also a testament to its practical utility. It addressed everything from anatomy to pharmacology, with a side of philosophy for good measure. But let's not fall into the trap of thinking Avicenna was some kind of medieval oracle. His work, like any product of its time, came with its quirks. The canon included some questionable treatments. Think Eye of Newt level remedies that make modern medicine look like a cakewalk. Yet the brilliance of Avicenna lay in his synthesis of knowledge. He took the best of Greek, Roman, Persian, and Indian traditions and combined them with his own observations, creating a medical tapestry as rich as the region's famed textiles. Now, let's debunk some myths. The notion that Avicenna single-handedly pulled medicine out of the Dark Ages is a bit of an overstatement. Yes, he was a trailblazer, but he stood on the shoulders of giants like Hippocrates and Galen. The real magic was his ability to question and innovate, a rare trait in an era where questioning the status quo could land you in a dungeon faster than you could say leech therapy. His philosophical musings, while ahead of their time, weren't without controversy. Avicenna's ideas about the soul and consciousness sparked debates across the Islamic world, sometimes leading to accusations of heresy. But in a twist worthy of a historical soap opera, these very ideas were later embraced by medieval Christian scholars who found Avicenna's blend of reason and faith quite palatable. Talk about irony. His works, once contentious in his own culture, became a cornerstone of European scholasticism. Economically speaking, the preservation of Avicenna's work was a testament to its value. Manuscripts were costly endeavors. Imagine a single volume being worth as much as a small village. Yet, the demand for the canon was so high that it was copied and recopied, spreading like wildfire through the academic world. This wasn't just about intellectual curiosity, it was also about prestige. Owning a copy of Avicenna's work was like having a first edition of The Great Gatsby, a status symbol for the learned elite. But let's not ignore the human factor. Avicenna, the man, was as complex as his writings. Though myths paint him as a sort of medieval superhero, he was, at the end of the day, a human navigating the turbulent waters of his time. He had his fair share of political missteps and personal challenges. Rumors of his indulgent lifestyle, think lavish feasts, and perhaps a bit too much wine, are sprinkled throughout his biographies. Whether these tales are fact or fiction, they highlight an intriguing truth. Avicenna was as much a product of his environment as he was a shaper of it. The preservation of his works wasn't just a matter of luck or divine intervention. It was the result of a complex interplay of economics, politics, and cultural exchange. The Islamic Golden Age, during which Avicenna lived, was a period marked by intellectual flourishing and cross-cultural exchanges. His works were translated into multiple languages, each version carrying the torch of his legacy a little further along the timeline. These translations ensured that his ideas survived the ravages of time, wars, and even the whims of fashion. As for the myths, they often blend reality with a touch of medieval marketing magic. Stories of Avicenna's miraculous cures and almost supernatural intellect make for captivating tales, but they also serve as a reminder of the human tendency to elevate figures beyond their human capabilities. It's comforting to think of Avicenna as a demigod of medicine and philosophy, but the truth is far more inspiring. He was a man who dared to question, to think, and to learn in a world that didn't always welcome such audacity. His legacy is a testament to the enduring power of curiosity and intellect. While the myths are enchanting, the reality is far richer, a narrative of human perseverance and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. In an age where information was both a luxury and a necessity, Avicenna's contributions carved a path through the fog of ignorance, lighting the way for future generations. But let's not wrap this up with a neat bow just yet. Avicenna's story is far from over. His ideas continue to reverberate through the halls of modern academia and beyond. From medical textbooks to philosophical debates, his legacy is a living, breathing entity, constantly evolving as new generations interpret and reinterpret his work. So, as we continue to unravel the tapestry of his life, Remember that while the legends are captivating, the reality is a testament to the power of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the light of knowledge can shine through. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into Avicenna's world, exploring how his legacy continues to shape our understanding of medicine, philosophy, and beyond. So, as we navigate the legacy of Avicenna and his sprawling influence that refuses to stay confined to dusty history books, it's time to unravel just how his ideas continue to infiltrate the modern world. Let's face it, Avicenna's name isn't exactly on the tip of everyone's tongue, unless you're hanging around medieval scholars or die-hard history buffs. Yet, his fingerprints are all over the blueprints of contemporary medicine and philosophy. It's like finding out your favorite indie band actually wrote that one jingle stuck in your head. They are more pervasive than you'd think. First off, let's talk medicine. Avicenna's Canon of Medicine wasn't just a medieval bestseller, it was a cornerstone of medical education. Fast forward to the 21st century, and you'll find his ideas echoing in the corridors of hospitals worldwide. Concepts like the importance of clinical trials and evidence-based medicine have roots that can be traced back to Avicenna. He was an early advocate for systematic experimentation, a notion that might seem as obvious as needing a GPS in a new city today, but was groundbreaking in an era when astrology was considered a valid diagnostic tool. His insistence on empirical observation and logical reasoning laid the groundwork for the scientific method, a cornerstone of modern medicine. The idea that you should actually observe symptoms and outcomes rather than rely on mystical interpretations. Revolutionary back then, but today's med students probably owe him a nod of thanks for sparing them from having to consult their horoscopes before diagnosing a patient. On the philosophical front, Avicenna's legacy is equally significant. His exploration of the nature of the soul and consciousness didn't just gather dust on the shelves of ancient libraries. It helped shape the intellectual landscape of both the Islamic world and medieval Europe. His thoughts on the immortality of the soul and the essence of existence provided a springboard for later philosophers like Thomas Aquinas and René Descartes. If you've ever heard someone ponder, what does it mean to be human? You can thank Avicenna for nudging that existential snowball down the hill. But let's address the elephant in the room. Why isn't Avicenna a household name in the Western world? Part of the answer lies in the quirks of history itself. While his works were being translated and studied in Europe, the Renaissance was just around the corner, and names like Leonardo da Vinci and Galileo were stealing the spotlight. Avicenna's contributions were absorbed and expanded upon, but his name often got lost in the shuffle, a classic case of being overshadowed by flashier narratives. Economically, Avicenna's influence is a testament to the enduring value of intellectual capital. Manuscripts of his works were worth their weight in gold, literally. In a time when books were rare commodities, owning a copy of the Canon of Medicine was akin to holding a golden ticket to the world of elite knowledge. This wasn't just about prestige. It was a practical investment in the cutting-edge science of the day, much like investing in tech stocks in the modern era. Despite this, Avicenna's appeal has remained somewhat niche outside of academic circles. While his ideas were integrated into the broader tapestry of scientific and philosophical thought, his name didn't always make it into the mainstream narrative. It's a bit like a band writing a hit song that everyone knows, but only music aficionados can name the original artist. Yet, for those in the know, Avicenna is a rock star of historical thought, a testament to the enduring power of ideas that transcend the boundaries of time and culture. In the end, Avicenna's legacy is a study in contrasts. The myths paint him as a miracle worker, a wizard of wisdom who could diagnose with a glance and heal with a touch. The reality is perhaps less glamorous but far more impressive. A relentless thinker whose curiosity and intellect carved new paths through the wilderness of ignorance. He was a man who questioned, who sought to understand, and who, in doing so, left an indelible mark on the world. So, as we close the book on Avicenna's tale, remember that history is rarely as straightforward as it seems. Behind every myth lies a kernel of truth, and behind every legend, a real person who grappled with the complexities of their time. Avicenna's story is one of intellectual courage and innovation, a reminder that even in the chaos of the past, the pursuit of knowledge can light the way forward. Whether you're in a modern lecture hall or a medieval manuscript room, his legacy continues to challenge and inspire, proof that the thirst for understanding is as timeless as the stars themselves.